Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Port Phillip City Council. The City of Port Phillip respectfully acknowledges the traditional owners of this land, the people of the Kulin Nations. We pay our respects to their elders past and present. We acknowledge and uphold their continued relationship to this land. This meeting is being conducted in a hybrid style and is streamed via Council's webcast page and Facebook Live. Streams and recordings of Council meetings are copyrighted and cannot be altered, reproduced, or republished without the permission of Council. If we experience any technical difficulties this evening, we will adjourn the meeting for a short time to resolve the issue. I remind attendees that any member of the public addressing Council must extend due courtesy and respect to Council and the processes under which it operates, and must take direction from the Chair, myself, whenever called on to do so. Speakers must remain respectful, and statements or questions must not be defamatory, offensive, or objectionable, aimed at embarrassing a councillor or a member of council staff, or relate to a matter outside the powers of council. The first item on tonight's agenda is a request to attend by electronic means. Councillors, we do not have any requests to attend by electronic means because we are all in the room. So apologies, we have none, we're all in the room. But I'd like to advise of mayoral leave of absence and appointing an acting mayor. So, councillors, I'm seeking a leave of absence from 22nd February to the 8th of March 2024. During this time, Deputy Mayor Louise Crawford has agreed to perform the duties of mayor. Councillors, I now seek a move for the motion that Council approves the leave of absence for Mayor Heather Consolo for the period of 22nd February to 8th of March 2024 and appoints Deputy Mayor Louise Crawford to be acting mayor for the period of the same period. Thank you, Peter Martin. Second, Councillor Nyagri. Let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you. All right, on to minutes of the previous meeting. Councillors, the minutes of the Council meeting on the 7th of February 2024 have been circulated. Are there any questions of these minutes? I see none. If not, can I have a mover of the minutes? Thank you. Nyagri to move and Martin to second. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimous. Thank you. I'll advise also that we'll have a deferral of an item. Councillors, in accordance with Rule 19 of the Council's governance rules, the CEO has requested and I have approved the removal of item 17.1, provision of recycling services, which was to be considered in the confidential section of tonight's meeting. So it's not on the public agenda anyway, but we will be doing it at a later date. On to declarations of conflict of interest. Does anyone have a conflict of interest in a matter being discussed at tonight's meeting? I see none. Move on. Tonight we have a condolence motion, which has been added to tonight's agenda. This is for Reg Macy, and I'll ask Councillor Pearl to speak to it.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Very happy to move this motion. If we get the photographs up, that would be very, very useful. There's Reg Macy was a dedicated leader and advocate for South Melbourne, for the South Melbourne community and the broader city of Port Phillip. He and his family made a significant contribution to our community. Reg embodied the benchmark of what it is to be a local representative. His passing leaves a remarkable list of achievements and an unwavering commitment to social justice and civic engagement, particularly around South Melbourne, but much more broadly than that. Reg's journey to being a public figure was marked by his fearless activism and his tireless effort to protect the interests of local residents. Reg was the original social media king. He would get out and get social with people, get evidence together, and then go to the media with it. Mal Walden was a good example. He was a permanent figure. The then Channel 10 news host was a permanent figure in Reg and Pat's living room, to the extent that Pat didn't need to ask what Mal's coffee or tea order was. She knew it off by heart. South Melbourne Market was a much-loved asset of Reg's, and he was a well-known person on the street. And I hear stories of Reg standing on the corner of Cecil Street and knowing the names of the vast majority of people that lived in that area and walked by him. That's the sort of trademark retail politician that Reg was. It's not easy being a Liberal in this area sometimes, and particularly in his era. and he laid the foundation for many politicians, and in fact his time on council became the bedrock of his time in the Victorian State Parliament, where he served very admirably from 1985 to 1992. In the early 1970s, Reg's passion for community and welfare was ignited when he stood up against the sale of the cherished Emerald Hill area. And perhaps if we can go to the next picture, if that's okay. We can see him out the front here with the residents of that group. At the time, a very culturally diverse and a large number of immigrants that lived in that area who needed an advocate, and Reg's vision for a thriving and inclusive community was unwavering. And ultimately, and I think history states, a day before those houses were to be auctioned off, Reg came up with a strategy that stopped that from happening and reflected what the community wanted at that point in time. It seems unthinkable today, if you go to the next slide, that we would consider putting a freeway through Port Melbourne suburb or adjacent to St Vincent's Place, but that's exactly what the government was trying to do in the early 1970s. And if it wasn't for Reg Macy in particular, that proposal probably would have gone ahead, connecting the Westgate Freeway through South Melbourne, through Port Melbourne, onto Beaconsfield Parade. In 1983, Reg orchestrated the grand 100th birthday concert for South Melbourne, showcasing the local talent and celebrating the rich history of the city. His commitment to preserving history and culture of South Melbourne was exemplified through various events and programs that brought residents together in joyous celebration. Reg Macy's impact extends far beyond his tenure in office, leaving an indelible mark on the South Melbourne community. His legacy as a compassionate leader, a fierce advocate and a community champion will continue to inspire future generations to stand up for what is right and to work towards a better, more inclusive society. More recently, since he's left public life, he's also made an important contribution to our community, particularly through being a local historian, which perhaps go to the next one. This is an example of some of the documents that Reg has in his file, which if he hadn't collected many of these documents, this is a telegram that actually was one of the key instruments to stop the freeways from being put through. It stopped, and this is from a Labor politician, at the time an opposition politician, who Reg came up with the strategy to work out how to cut federal funding to the Freeways project, which actually put an end to the extension process. But he kept hundreds of these documents, which now form a huge body of work for local historians. And he also started 2 Facebook groups, which have thousands of members in them, focusing on South Melbourne and Port Melbourne history. If you look at the posts in those groups, he doesn't talk about himself at all. He talks about his experiences with other people and telling stories of individuals and relaying factual information. So we extend our sincere condolences to Reg's family and friends, and our flags will be lowered to half-mast in his honour, as is customary to do so when one of our former mayors passed away in the city. Rest in peace, and a sincere gratitude to Reg Macy and his family.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. I note that some of the family and friends are listening online as well. Councillors, I seek to move a motion that Council expresses its deep regret on the passing of Reg Macy, offers its sincere condolences to their family, and places on record its appreciation for their services to the City of Port Phillip. Councillor Pearl, would you like to move that?
Yep.
And who would like to second it? Councillor Bond, thank you. And I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That passes unanimous. Thank you. All right, now we're on to public question time and submissions. Under Council's governance rules, public questions can only be asked about items not on the agenda. Therefore, public questions will be referred to an officer for response. Therefore, only public questions. So if you're speaking to an item on the agenda tonight and you have a question, a councillor may choose to take that question up to you when we're speaking to the item later in the night. Now, I have about 30 on my list if I count 29, 30, close. It'll be 2 minutes per speaker tonight, and even if it wasn't the transition up and down, that's an hour. So It's a busy night ahead of us, but we all value that you've come here tonight or online to speak with us. The first person I call upon is Ann Michaels, speaking to item 14.1, notice of motion by Councillor Martin on the Heritage Verandah Upgrade Project. When you come down, if you're in the room, you can be the example, Ann. You can come down to the chair. The microphone should already be on. Is there a red light? It'll soon be on. You do not need to turn it on and off. We'll just leave it on. I'll need you to say your full name, your suburb, and you'll have the 2 minutes. I have a timer up here with an annoying beep, so we'll all know when that 2 minutes is up, to be fair to everybody. Thank you, Anne. If you can get us started.
My name is Ann Michaels from South Melbourne, and thank you all for the opportunity to speak to you tonight about the heritage verandas in South Melbourne. And I'm sure Ray Macy, as a champion of South Melbourne, would enjoy hearing about the verandas. The veranda is a significant part of South Melbourne's identity and a significant part of our history. They're very important to the local community and identified in our precinct audits for beautification. And they're also very much highlighted in the South Melbourne Structure Plan as an important part of South Melbourne to look after and to take forward into the future. Just a little bit of background. The current verandas were installed about 40 years ago. They were actually installed. They're not the original verandas from the 1880s. They were installed by the Victorian Ministry of Housing as part of a precinct uplift program. And at the time, they also did a significant number of shop facades. Wind forward 40 years later, because that was done in 1983, a lot of the verandas are in disrepair and are not adding, I guess, a lot of value to the community. They need a lot of work. There's guttering issues and all sorts of different repair stuff. There's particular ones between Bank and Dorcas Street that are subject to the ownership of about 14 different owners, 17 properties, very disparate group of and very difficult to coordinate a uniform approach to repair. We were lucky enough as a traders association to apply to the Victorian Government for a grant, given the Ministry of Housing did the repair 40 years ago, and were successful in getting a grant. We have an amazing opportunity here to do a uniform improvement across that whole block, so it gives a benefit back to, as I said, the community and South Melbourne's identity of the heritage and verandas. We have a small shortfall.
Thank you, Anne. I'm sorry that I'll have to stop with the 2 minutes there, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, I call upon Michael Knight, submitting a question to Council. Are you here, Michael Knight? I'll come back. Do we know who's checked in? No? Okay. I call upon Sheena Chabra, submitting a question to Council. Hello, Sheena. Name, suburb, 2 minutes.
My name is Sheena Chabra, a resident of Port Phillip Council and member of the Plant-Based Treaty, a global initiative to halt the widespread degradation of critical ecosystems caused by animal agriculture and to promote a shift to healthier, sustainable plant-based diets. Australia grapples with climate breakdown evidenced by extreme events like the 2019-2020 bushfires. Port Phillip is already experiencing heightened temperatures, decreased rainfall, and rising sea levels. I applaud Port Phillip Council for declaring a climate emergency in 2019 and formulating sustainability action plans. Yet our food system is a critical and overlooked aspect. The latest IPCC 6th assessment emphasizes the urgent need for methane reductions to prevent a 1.5 degree temperature rise. Animal agriculture is responsible for almost all of Australia's agriculture-related methane emissions, hence requires immediate attention. Despite emission reduction targets, the impact of our food system is consistently overlooked by governments and councils. The IPCC advocates a vegan diet as the best diet for combating climate change, yet a notable public education gaps exists in school and council events, libraries, services, and even things like community gardens. Council and school events continue to serve beef sausages and dairy, with attendees unaware that plant-based alternatives require 75% less water, 93% less land, and produce 87% fewer emissions. Urgent action is needed to spread these crucial facts for informed decision-making. Will Port Phillip Council join 26 global cities, including Amsterdam, Edinburgh, and Los Angeles, by endorsing the plant-based treaty, and table a motion to update its climate action plan to include a food-based strategy? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Because you're asking a question not on an agenda item, I'll refer to Council Officer, this is Fiona van der Hoeven, to give you a response.
Okay.
Hi, Fiona.
Yeah. Through you, Mayor. Thank you for bringing to our attention the plant-based treaty. Council is now aware that 26 cities worldwide have endorsed this treaty, but none in Australia to date. Council is already doing several things in this area, including our catering policy, which requires that we consider the environmental impacts of our menus and ensure that we provide vegan and vegetarian options. Council also manages 5 community gardens, another 4 run by community groups on lands managed by other authorities, and we have 7 raised planter boxes in our parks and reserves for communal use. Vegan and vegetarian catering is provided at many events, and for example, the annual School Sustainability Festival has enjoyed vegetarian catering for some 18 consecutive years. We will continue to look for opportunities to continue to build on our environmental sustainable initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you. I call upon Isaac Herman submitting a question to Council. Thank you, Sheena. Isaac, I have a copy of yours and it's quite lengthy. With the 2 minutes.
Yeah, I've whittled it down.
Yeah, oh good, okay, great. Go for it.
Isaac Herman from Eld. Good evening, everyone. Has the Elster Creek Memorandum of Understanding been extended for another term, or has it now run its course? If the Memorandum of Understanding has officially run its course, then under what arrangements does the CEO's Forum and Officers Working Group continue to meet? I'd ask, where are the notes, minutes or records pertaining to the CEO's Forum meetings? Was the Elwood Main Drain duplication project discussed at those meetings? Is the CEO our representative at the state's Flood Leadership Committee? And if so, has the CEO followed up on the Council's plea for state government support for 6 proposed flood mitigation projects? Were these proposals and the Elwood Main Drain duplication project discussed by the Flood Leadership Committee? Will the CEO, in that case, make the minutes of these discussions available? Has the City of Port Phillip given any official or unofficial go-ahead to Melbourne Water for its proposed Elwood Main Drain duplication project? And if so, where is this documented? And how is it that Melbourne Water states that our council officers are already dedicating hours and energy to this project? Will Council insist that any consideration of the proposed Elwood Main Drain duplication project must necessarily factor in to certain damage of the bay, coming from ever-increasing amounts of filthy floodwaters from a staggering 67% increase in Glen Ira's Elster Creek catchment dwellings between 2016 and 2036 that will briefly pass through an underperforming Elstonwick Park flood retarding basin? I'd ask that Council move a notice of motion, or that a councillor move a notice of motion to reflect its willingness to act in a manner consistent with the Elster Creek Management Memorandum of Understanding, the Elster Creek Catchment Flood Management Plan, EPA Waters Act, the Coastal Marine Act, the State Planning Policy Framework, in all contact regarding Melbourne Water's Elwood Main Drain duplication project, and to be open and transparent at all levels of operation regarding the flood mitigation.
Impressive, thank you. Brian T., can I refer to you for an answer on some of that, all of that?
My colleague Fiona will provide.
Oh, Fiona, sorry, I didn't have it written down. Fiona, please.
That's all right. Thank you. Through you, Mayor, thank you for that, for these questions in relation to Elster Creek flood management and the Elwood Main Drain duplication project. In relation to Elster Creek, Melbourne Water coordinate all the meetings, and they hold the information on their website. And they also have the ongoing operation of the Community Advisory Panel, which has most recently met on the 5th of December in 2023. In relation to the Flood Leadership Committee, our CEO has recently been appointed to this committee, which is a Melbourne water-run initiative. And as a member, he's able to speak to our challenges broadly, and particularly in relation to coastal and inner urban councils. In relation to the the Elwood Main Drain Duplication Project, Council considers this an important project to assist in mitigating flooding issues in Elwood and surrounds. We do have a project manager overseeing discussions with Melbourne Water about access arrangements, area of occupation, reinstatement and benefits for the community. We share concerns about pollution and impacts on green spaces, and we will continue to work with Melbourne Water to reduce impacts to the community and the environment.
Thank you. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you for the questions. We will do a more detailed response. We've got a whole package of them here. I'll make sure that we respond to you in full. Just so you're aware, while I have recently been appointed to the Flood Leadership Group, we've yet to meet. So that's planned shortly.
Thank you.
Thank you. I call upon Jack Richmond submitting a question to Council. Right, was it? Reitman, sorry, I apologise.
Reitman, it's all fine.
Name, suburb, and you have 2 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mayor, councillors, and council officers. My name is Jack Reitman. I live at 6 Grosvenor Street, and I'm here on behalf today of a Port Phillip citizens group that is formed in response to the proposed redevelopment of the Grosvenor Street precinct. As context, Housing First has relocated residents and begun clearing units at 17 Grosvenor Street. Informing residents their 20-unit social housing block will be demolished in May to build 68 new units. However, despite scores of written requests for information and consultation from both residents and neighbours, Housing First has not publicly disclosed their plans. Our questions: As Governor of the Port Phillip Housing Trust, will Council request in writing that Housing First provide details about their proposed Grosvenor redevelopment before demolition begins in May? Specifically, residents want to know: 1, what is the project roadmap for demolition, redevelopment, and community consultation? 2, how will the Grosvenor precinct be impacted and future residents integrated into the community? For example, more than tripling homes will impact green space, natural light, privacy, security, parking, heritage, character, and essential services. And 3, how will Council ensure redevelopment most benefits and least harms the community?
Thank you. I'll refer to Tanya. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, through you, Mayor. Council does not currently have power as Governor of Port Phillip Housing Trust to require Housing First to provide project information to share this with the community or to require them to conduct community engagement. Housing First are intending to utilise a provision in the planning scheme where the proposal is determined by the Minister for Planning, not by Council. When an application is lodged, the state government will undertake a public notification inviting comments. As part of this process, local residents will be able to provide feedback. Council would be included in that notification and council officers will provide comment. It should, however, be noted that there are no third-party rights of appeal. Having said all of that, council officers and the CEO continue to seek information from Housing First, will continue to seek information from Housing First regarding this project, including its approach to community engagement and support for tenants.
Thank you very much. Is Michael Knight here now, submitting a question to Council? If not, if you're online, maybe you can get in contact. Nope, no one? Okay. All right. Now we'll go on to people speaking to items on the agenda tonight. So, Coralie Ling. What? Oh, sorry. No, sorry. We'll go to one more question in the room. Teresa Warren, can you come on down, please? Welcome to the chair, Teresa. Name, suburb, and you have 2 minutes, please.
Hopefully I'll get through it. Teresa Warren, South Melbourne, greeting everybody. Because residents and visitors like to use the front fence of St Luke's Church as a eating place and regularly leave their litter behind, including although the gardeners, St Luke's gardeners, have pruned back the rosemary plants and arbor shrubs to make it easier for church people, including myself, to pick the litter up, some people have started to throw the litter up into the hedge that goes along the disabled path, which makes it impossible for me to pick up the litter. It would be very much appreciated if Council could install extra litter bins in this area. Another favourite meeting spot for people is on top of the hot water pump in front of 200 Docker Street, near a phone box. Can Council please consider putting in a litter bin in this area also? Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. See you.
Through you, Mayor. Teresa, it was lovely to see you at the St Kilda Festival on the weekend. I hope you had a great time. I have commenced follow-up with officers around the bin, and I commit to coming back to you with a response as quickly as I can.
Thank you.
Well done. All right, we will go back to my list here. Corley Ling, can you come on down? Hi, Corley. You're speaking to item 9.1, Aged Care Reforms, Future Model for Endorsement.
Coralie Ling from St Kilda, and I'm speaking about the aged care policy and the abandonment of in-home services. I am a receiver of in-home services and I really appreciate them, and I would be glad if they were continued. But I'm also a member of the Older Persons Advisory Committee, and I know that there are difficulties about keeping the in-home services because of the federal government reforms, which require many more qualified staff and many more services, as well as different funding options. And so a new proposal has been made for the village model of aged care. And an important aspect of this village model is that there be a connector role, so that the 700 or so people who receive in-home services will not be abandoned, but this connector role will link them with appropriate services that are available non-for-profit here in the city of Port Phillip. Now, it's really important that we have this connector role, and we need more than one when you think of the 700 people that need to be helped to transition, but also in terms of the future, because aged care requirements are going to increase in this area as they increase all over the country, and 20% of this city at the moment are aged people or older persons. So I'm asking that we accept the advice about the new aged care proposal, but that we make sure that we give a very large part of it to the connector role so that no one is abandoned. Thank you.
Thank you, Corley. Well timed. I call upon John Spearing, speaking to item 9.1, Aged Care Reforms as well.
John Spearings, Elwood. Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. I just want to address one contentious point tonight, whether the proposal on the table amounts to a privatisation or not. Some have argued that Council's in-home services are intended to be transferred to not-for-profits and that somehow this does not amount to privatisation. I'm not being critical of not-for-profits. There are so many great not-for-profits, and I've worked for or facilitated significant funding for many of them. But by definition, they are not public services owned by everyone. A key question in this debate tonight is who will uphold the public interest now and into the future, in ensuring the well-being of some of the most vulnerable people in Port Phillip? Who will be accountable to ensure local needs are understood and met? Who will be best placed, best informed and best dedicated to deliver services that meet the needs of our particular community, which is ageing, with high levels of people living on their own and with many people with high needs? I would say, and decades of delivery of quality in-home services by Port Phillip and previous councils attest that local government is that place. Council is responsible to people that have built and resourced the community. It can ensure that carers are familiar and regular rather than constantly subcontracted and subcontracted again. Council is accountable for the standards and quality of services through the sorts of debates that we're having tonight. Council enables innovation and local connection in ways that other providers can struggle to do. Council's aged care staff worked around the clock through pandemic lockdowns to ensure services and local connection continued. I'm not saying that it's an easy choice facing you, given some difficulties in recruiting and the complex market design ahead. But in an age of consumer choice, it is vital that in-home services provided by Council are in the mix. Thank you.
Thank you. I call upon Rhonda Small, speaking at 9.1 aged care reforms. Hi, Rhonda.
Thank you, Rhonda Small, St Kilda. Councillors, it's tragic that tonight you will consider handing over our much valued public in-home aged care service to private, as yet unknown, even if not-for-profit providers. How has it come to this? Tracing back the trajectory of the Commonwealth aged care reforms, I wanted to see how the councils who will continue their service delivery under the new model are managing to do so. Back in 2020-21, it seems that what councils like Kingston, Hume, Bayside and Whittlesea did was review their service and respond to their community's need for increased care at home. They applied to become home care package providers in addition to their entry-level services, receiving increased Commonwealth funding to do so. This enabled them to sustain and expand services for their older residents in preparation for the streamlining of the home care packages with the Commonwealth Home Support Program into a single support-at-home program. So, although our former Mayor said of Port Phillip in The Age as late as August 2022 that no discussion has occurred at this time as to an exit from these services, nothing in fact was being done to review the service at that time and investigate how to continue in-home care delivery in preparation for the reforms. Consequently, our service has been run down, losing referrals as home care package providers in the area picked up local clients as they qualified for packages. Port Phillip's aged care program once supported around 1,500 residents and employed some 90 staff, but today fewer than half that number receive the service and staff numbers have also halved. Why did our council not grasp the opportunity to sustain and expand the service 3 years ago? It feels like the easy way out was taken, death by 1,000 cuts. Yes, it would have required a big investment to develop the service, but why was such an investment not seen as worthwhile? Soon enough, as someone's already said, 20% of our residents will be over 65. Why wasn't the community engaged in discussion about whether such an investment was supported? But Council's been given a reprieve. The delay in the introduction means you can think differently.
Thank you,
3.5 years to support staying in the service.
Thank you. I call upon Ian McDonald, speaking to 9.1 aged care reforms. Hello, Ian.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. My name's Ian McDonald. I'm from Albert Park and I'm the Deputy Chair of OPAC. OPAC's 2023 aged care submission asks that for the full consideration be given by Council to follow Bayside's decision to stay in aged care. OPAC understands several options were considered. OPAC supports the preferred proposal with a very strong proviso for Council's ongoing support of the connector roles to service some in the vicinity of 650, 700, maybe more users who may struggle to understand and use this new system. Nobody knows what services are available better than Council officers. At $1.14 per $100 of external funding, the net cost of services to 650 users currently it's a good deal. Clearly, council should be seen to be using funds wisely and fairly always. OPAC asks that council stands by the endorsed May 23 positive ageing care policy. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, now going to the blue forms on 9.1. So we have Leslie Rosenblatt speaking 9.1.
Thank you. Evening, Mayor and councillors, and Tanya McKenzie, Interim General Manager, and Bridget, if she's here. Hi.
Can you name and suburb for the record?
My name's Leslie Rosenblatt, and I live in St Kilda.
Thank you.
I've only really got one word to say in my 2 minutes because other people will speak very much more eloquently than I can, and I'm not very concise. So I'm going to restrict myself to one word, and that is don't do this. That's actually 3 words, but I just can't understand what's to be gained from it. I can see what's to be lost, but even on the financials, it just doesn't make sense. And this council is so wealthy and so many people living alone, and we need these services. And there'll be this huge gap and everyone will be disconnected, and your connector will have a devil of a time trying to reconnect people. So I'm not very pleased with this recommendation, and I think you need to pause, take time, think about it and reflect before making such a drastic decision. Don't do it.
Thank you. I call upon Martin Kingham, speaking to 9.1. Hello, Martin.
Hi there. Martin Kingham from St Kilda. Thank you, Mayor. I spoke here at your last meeting, and I spoke from my experience as a client of the service about the high quality of care that I enjoy provided by the City of Port Phillip. But I also spoke about the serious shortcomings for clients and workers in the currently underfunded, under-resourced and understaffed private provider environment. Tonight, a bit like the previous speaker, I've really only got one thing to say, and it's a simple request. Please defer this decision. The new federal funding package and the system that goes with it does not apply until July 2027. That's more than 3 years away at the earliest, and anything could happen in the meantime with federal government decisions. Why the indecent haste? We're talking about the health and well-being of older, vulnerable residents. Surely a little extra time should be taken. There's far too much at stake. Proper consultation. And just quickly, I took part in the consultation as a client, and I was told there's only one option the council's considering, and that's exit. So that's not consultation. We need proper consultation, including all possible options, and decisions should be made with the benefit of all of those facts and and all views from the community. There also needs to be a lot more discussion and planning on how any transitional arrangements would work if ultimately you decide to stop providing us with this valuable assistance. We've spent all of our lives paying rates and taxes. Surely older and more vulnerable residents deserve from you councillors some basic respect, dignity and recognition of our contribution. Please take the time that we have available So get this right.
Thank you, Martin. Oh, okay. I call upon Gail Wilson, speaking in 9.1. Hello, Gail.
I'm Gail Wilson. I'm in my mid-80s. I've lived in the city of Port Phillip for nearly 60 years. I knew Reg Macy. He was on council with my husband. We didn't always agree. But, you know, he was part of a community from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s on, where people in the community worked together for many, many good things, for the schools, for the housing, everything. And I've had a career in aged care, on a board of management at a nursing home, and as a registered nurse caring for older people. I don't use any community services. I'm lucky, I'm well. I hear good things about what council provides, and I would just like to support what these other people have said. You have a while to think about this. For goodness sake, talk to people in the community, talk to people who've had experience, and don't rush into it. Not all private providers are bad, but look to the Royal Commission on Nursing Homes and Aged Care and learn from that what happens in many cases when the bottom line is to make a profit. And where you can continue working and providing services for older people, I hope you will do it. It'll come the time and I might need some, and I'd like them to be there, and I'd like them to be provided mostly through the council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you give your suburb for the record? Okay. I call upon Muriel Arnott. I hope I get that right. I'm reading handwriting. Sorry. Name, suburb, in 2 minutes, please.
I'm Muriel Arnott and I live in Middle Park. I'm concerned about the proposal to privatise or outsource aged care facilities in Port Phillip. When outsourced, such services are no longer within the public body, thus responsible and accountable to their council. The history of care services in Port Phillip and previously St Kilda South and Port Melbourne was of a very high standard. Meals on Wheels social work departments where action would be taken as soon as required with all the relevant responsibility. This does not happen when privatised or outsourced. Meals on Wheels is a classic example. This request comes from my lived experience of working professionally and having volunteered in many aspects of aged care in Port Phillip, previously in South Melbourne, for 30 years. Once outsourced, the capacity and reliability of delivering quality care and services decreases markedly. This can be seen in many care services, especially those for the vulnerable aged who need care. There is enough evidence to substantiate this fact. Frequently outsourced services get bigger, allegedly for efficiency, but we all know there is also an agenda for more money, including not-for-profit organisations. And when bigger, more administration is required, who are paid more, which results in cutbacks made at the coalface, impacting the person receiving care. Money is not saved because a profit surplus must be made by the outsourced company, hence quality of care is compromised. You are in denial if you do not agree with this fact. I ask every councillor to question what quality of care they would wish for themselves or their family. I can assure you the care will be better if not privatised or outsourced. Don't lose kindness, consideration and humanity for those needing such services, which is what you are doing if aged care services are privatised, outsourced. They're no longer the responsibility of and accountable to a public council. I plead this as a ratepayer for many years and hope you will respect and acknowledge those experienced in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. I call upon Carolyn Hutchins, speaking in 9.1. Hi, Carolyn.
Hello. Thank you, Mayor. I've read fully the report to Council.
Sorry, name, suburb, and then start,
sorry.
please.
Carolyn Hutchins, West St Kilda.
Thank you.
It's a long report, and I'll take, hopefully, only 2 minutes. I was on council and 30 years ago now, and I've lived in the city over 50 years. And when I was on council, the aged persons committee, the Committee for Aged Persons in our city was developed, an advisory committee to council. Council's got a terrific committee going, advising, and there's many questions in their submission that have big warning signs about this proposal. Only 10 months ago, the ageing policy was endorsed in May last year. And what's happened to that policy, which you worked on with the committee? Is it being implemented or is it being sidelined? We're not a village anymore, and I think it's an odd name to call it a village connector. We're a series, perhaps, of villages, but one person to do even a whole team would have a big job to take over what's being proposed. The Age tomorrow, I think, has got an article that says of the 79 municipalities in Victoria, 26 already. In your report, it mentions Kingston and Brighton, I think. But there's 26 municipalities that are planning to do this themselves. They're not all going over. For our council to consider retrenching 45 workers from their aged department who know our community and its residents is a very expensive, great loss, and a great loss to the community to think of the costs of retrenchment.
Carolyn, I'm sorry to have to stop you there at the 2 minutes, but I need to be fair to everybody, giving the same amount of time. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
I call upon Brenda Forbath, speaking 9.1. Good evening, Brenda.
Brenda Forbath, Elwood, talking about the aged care issue. It is really absolutely crucial that Council not proceed with the recommendation before it tonight that provides for Council to exit the provision of most in-home services for our older citizens. The consultation conducted last year was seriously limited and troubling because it did not give the community the opportunity to discuss and consider the option of Council remaining as an in-home service provider. It certainly appears that Council had a predetermined position about privatising its aged care services and proceeded with a consultation to reach the outcome it sought. It's time that all of the options and all the information be presented to the community and our older citizens so that a genuine choice can be made. The cost of remaining as an aged care service provider are set out in the report to Council tonight of $1.4 million is, in my view, not such a large amount when we consider the importance of caring for our older community at a very vulnerable stage of their life. The figure of $1.4 million, however, needs to be further interrogated. Current Council expenditure is $350,000 per annum, and we have no information as to how much people will be paying for their services under the new funding system. So the final cost to Council is still to be determined, but a final decision should not be made on cost alone. Thank you.
Thank you. I call upon Peter Murray speaking to item 9.1. Hello, Peter.
Peter Moraitis, St Kilda. I'd like to make 2 points about why keeping provision of aged care services by Port Phillip Council is so important. 1. For over 40 years, Port Phillip Council and its predecessors in St Kilda, South Melbourne and Port Melbourne have supported elders in the municipality in so many different ways. Indeed, the councils have been path-breaking in creating meaningful supportive practices for elders that have become models for municipalities across Australia. It's the community of practice initiated and built on over a long period of time, the people that do it, the values which govern it, the local know-how, the ways of caring that are at the heart of aged care services, not easily translatable into written performance statements that any other body can pick up and apply. While the attempt has now been to reframe these communities of practice as Commonwealth packages that anybody can provide, there's the good chance that this valuable culture and practice will be lost. As I understand it, once Council decides to desist from provision of aged care, it will be up to a Commonwealth panel to decide on the aged care service providers that elders can choose from. The decision will not be the decision of Port Phillip Council, of the elders or the elders of Port Phillip. It's quite possible that the providers will be large, anonymous, bureaucratic service providers which momentarily will not be for profit. We've seen in other areas, for instance, TAFE, where that can go. The second point is that local municipal control of aged care service means the potential for local democratic involvement by community in the kind of support that elders want. As we age, we should be empowered to determine what kind of assistance, activities and support, and this can be best done at the municipal level. The Elder Persons Advisory Group is an exemplar of how representation of empowered elders can work, and that could be amplified. The alternative is individual elderly people given individual packages, choices by private providers.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
All right, I believe that's everybody speaking to aged care tonight. So the next one I've got quite a few speakers on is 10.1, Integrated Transport Strategy Review. So I'll call upon John Green speaking to that first. And just to let you know, I'm going to move Henry up after you, if you're going to let him know. Hi, John.
Hi, my name is John Green. I come from Balaclava.
Thank you.
I was just reading over what you are considering doing with respect to the transport plan, and I'm a bit discouraged that you're going to be backing away from separated cycleways in terms of making it a priority. I feel like the main concern that's been popping up in our community is conflict with neighborhoods where these separated cycleways are going through, like on Kerford and on Inkerman. And what I wanted to emphasize is that the conflict isn't really between cyclists and these neighborhoods, which are just a couple of hundred people in that specific neighborhood. The conflict is between the 103,000 citizens of the city of Port Phillip who want a sustainable and livable city in the future and those 100 people. This is really a NIMBY situation, a not in my backyard situation. And these people do not want to bear the burden of the articulated desire of the city of Port Phillip, which is to have a sustainable future. So I think we always need to think of it in that context. And so it's disappointing that this kind of friction is causing us to lose this stronger plan for more separated, connected cycleways. And it's disappointing, and I would hope that you would consider that when you consider the amendment to Article 18A. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Is Henry coming back in? I can go with somebody else. Oh, there you are. Hey, Henry, are you ready to speak? I call upon Henry Green speaking to 10.1, the Integrated Transport Strategy, please. Hello, Henry. Name, suburb, and you have 2 minutes.
Hi, I'm Henry Green, and I'm from Balaclava in the city of Port Phillip. And I'm here today because I want to tell everyone how important bike lanes are for the younger generation, my generation. I'm representing the many, many young people who need the ability to ride safely around our city, the young people whose lives will be lost due to a lack of safe cycling lanes if this small but loud group of people have their way. A lot more people would be cycling if we had safe, permanent bike lanes. I've already shared with the councillors about my 5 scary run-ins with cars. One of those times I got hit. This is 5 too many, I think. We're not just talking about accidents, though. We need to talk about the biggest killer of my generation, obesity. Kids being driven around and not getting enough exercise because riding is not safe. The benefits of accident transport for my generation are proven and important. I'm afraid if we miss the chance to build these bike lanes, we may not get another. The kids of today need those in power to be brave and fight for us for a better future.
Thank you, Henry. I now call upon Andrea Paul, speaking 10.1. Hello, Andrea.
Hello. Good evening, Andrea Paul, St Kilda. Why on earth is Council proposing to end a separated bike lane policy? It's just completely outrageous and retrograde. I'm going to echo Les and say, don't. It's insane. I'm going to ask, do you think road safety infrastructure like pedestrian crossings and traffic lights increase safety? Are we asked whether there should be traffic lights or pedestrian crossings? Were we asked if we wanted infrastructure like road narrowing, roundabouts, speed bumps, speed limits? Were we asked whether we should have 40k an hour speed limits near schools? All safety measures. Separated bike lanes are and should be a normal safety measure for cyclists. And I want to say that you all know the benefits of bike lanes. The research shows that it basically increases safety massively, it increases bike use, and it reduces car congestion. It actually benefits not only cyclists, it benefits drivers. So I'm going to ask you, does anyone here get nervous driving a car down Inkerman Street, worried about hitting cyclists or any narrow street for that matter? How would you feel if a family member or anyone, in fact, was killed on Inkerman Street? How would you feel as a driver if you actually hit someone? I read your report. You said that it costs a lot of money. Has anyone even raised the costs, the environmental costs, the air pollution costs, the cost to our healthcare system? Have you even thought about that? People have to live with not only the emotional stress, drivers. Sorry, I have to just quickly finish that and just say it should be the norm. Keep the policy, okay?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I call upon Josh Stencil, joining us online. Actually, our first online guest tonight. Josh, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Oh, good. We can hear you. Name, suburb, and 2 minutes, please.
Okay. Josh Stencil, St Kilda East. Look, since the integrated transport strategy was written in 2018 and protected bike lanes have been rolled out, residents and traders have widely objected because the bike lanes have caused safety issues, made driving and parking very difficult, caused economic damage to local businesses, and they're not used by the majority of residents. So it's therefore very encouraging that Council seeks to amend Action 18 specifically to investigate alternative approaches that do not rely on fully protected bike corridors and to advocate to state government to deliver protected bike corridors on state-managed arterial roads. And I support this amendment, especially considering the time and cost blowouts that have been reported by Council. Many residents are aghast that the Inkerman Street bike lane is now projected to cost almost $10 million. With regard to the community survey that was conducted, the survey had 87% of respondents who currently ride a bike. If you compare that to the National Walking and Cycling Participation Survey, which last published in 2021, that showed 18% of Australians ride a bike over the past week and 40% over the past year. So 87% versus 18 or 40%, and this was, mind you, during the COVID pandemic, demonstrates that the survey suffers from significant selection bias. This is no surprise, as feedback was specifically sought from the Port Phillip Bicycle Users Group, who are actively lobbying Council to adopt Option A for Inkerman Street. The survey responses are not indicative of community support, but what a dedicated group of bike enthusiasts believe. So I'd urge Council to view this with scepticism. Most of the local roads in Port Phillip are safe and quiet for cyclists, and the vast majority of residents have not had their say. Sensible strategies can be implemented if the views of the whole community are taken into account. I'm happy that Council are taking a more holistic and considered approach to this and agree with Council that lobbying the Victorian Government for corridors along state-managed arterial roads is a sensible solution. So I would just urge councillors to reconsider transport proposals which remove car parking spots from our roads, which the majority
Thank you, Josh. I'll have to
require.
stop you there. That's the 2 minutes. I don't know if you can hear the buzzer, but thank you very much.
Yep. Thanks.
I call upon Catherine Aistrop, speaking in 10.1. Hello, Catherine.
Hi, Catherine Aistrop from Balaclava. Mayor, Deputy Mayor and councillors, I welcome the opportunity to speak in support of the, I'm assuming
We're
that's
starting
my
2 minutes now, yeah, sorry about that.
In support of the recommendation to vary Action 18 of the Integrated Transport Strategy under item 10.1 of the agenda. I commend the authors of the report for their frank advice to Council about the issues and particularly the challenges associated with implementation of major change to existing infrastructure and within existing communities. Good policy is grounded on both vision and pragmatism, and good governance involves continuous improvement and the ability to learn from experience. Now, the report to Council makes clear that the current strategy in respect of protected bike corridors is not practically or financially achievable. And in light of the submissions that you've already heard tonight in relation to aged care, cost is a significant issue, and I would implore Council to consider that as part of their consideration of this particular issue and where money should be spent. Now, the report also makes clear that there are genuine alternatives to protected bike corridors that increase safety and implicitly go towards Council's overarching goal of increasing bike usage. The proposed variation does not equate to a lack of action. To the contrary, it's a sensible acknowledgement that there are practical and financial limitations to achieving implementation of the current strategy. The proposed variation will give Council the flexibility it needs to tailor appropriate and achievable proposals for safety interventions, which take into account existing conditions, road use, and the impact of traffic and parking changes on the community, as well as, importantly, residents and businesses. I implore you to accept the recommendations for varying Action 18.
Thank you, Catherine. I call upon... I call upon Justin Halliday, who's joining us online. Do we have Justin? Justin, can you hear us?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, great. Name, suburb, and 2 minutes, please.
Good evening, Mayor, Councillors and Officers. I'm Justin Halliday from St Kilda East. I'm speaking tonight in opposition to the proposed change to Action 18 of the Integrated Transport Strategy. This proposed change would remove the words protected bike corridors from the action and replace it with a range of interventions. And unfortunately, this proposal shines a spotlight on Council's inability to implement its own endorsed strategy. In its failures to build protected bike corridors, Council has prioritised the private annexation of public land over the needs of vulnerable road users, including cyclists, e-mobility riders and delivery workers. Simultaneously, over the last few years, the state government has managed to implement 2 fantastic safe bike routes in the city of Port Phillip on Moray Street and in St Kilda Road. Each of these has demonstrated abundantly the value of protected bike lanes and the impact that they can have on our road use. The proposed change also goes against the results of the community consultation on the strategy. This consultation favoured protected bike corridors in all scenarios, high speed and low speed, and yet the recommendation here seems to ignore that. If the Council accepts the proposed change, Council will be in violation of its statutory obligation to mitigate high-risk environments for the local community, as areas like Inkerman Street have demonstrated they are, with over 30 serious accidents. This will open the council to legal action by impacted community members. Furthermore, the change represents a formal surrender from the council on implementing the integrated transport strategy, and it reflects council's lack of commitment to a safe bike network across Port Phillip. Therefore, I ask council to reject this change and get to work on implementing the endorsed strategy as it stands. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Justin. I call upon Jeffrey Edwards, speaking to item 10.1. Hello, Jeffrey.
Madam Mayor, councillors, Jeffrey Edwards, St Kilda East. Now, tonight I'm here to urge councillors to support the change to action item 18 under agenda item 10.1, integrated strategy review. Critically, this proposed change moves away from a clumsy one-size-fits-all blanket approach, which is, I suggest to you, unachievable. And it enables now council to take a wider range of considerations into account. In that regard, I note that under point 6.3, your point 6.3, the report does not touch on the potential but real reputational risks if council were to implement an endorsed strategy without carefully taking into account the amenity impacts to a large sections of the community. For example, potential claims made against council in the Human Rights Commission on the basis of indirect discrimination under the Disability Discrimination Act 1992, or at point 7, where the financial impacts are discussed. I note there is no reference to or provision made for potential damages in the event an endorsed strategy were to be implemented and resulted in financial loss or harm to traders. And of course, any associated legal costs which would, of course, accompany any such claims. So I'm here to applaud the report for recommending that a more balanced, equitable, fiscally responsible and comprehensive approach to this extremely complex issue be taken by council, and so I strongly urge all councillors, to support the change and addition to action 18 in your strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me, I'd like to take a moment to remind people who are coming to our meeting that they need to show respect to the other speakers. No one interrupted you. This is a warning. Stop. Please stop. You need to follow my direction. This is a warning that snickering, it's just not appropriate. Please show respect to those speakers or you'll have to leave. All right, this is your last warning. You will be removed from the meeting if you do continue to interrupt. I now call upon Jazz Bradley, speaking to 10.1. Hi, Jazz.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors. Jazz Bradley, Balaclava. I'm speaking in support of the recommendation in relation to the Integrated Transport Strategy Review and the proposed amendment to item 18, which is 10.1 on your agenda. The report makes it clear that Council's experience to date in relation to the Bike Corridor project has highlighted the complexities, time and costs associated with delivering the proposed 11 corridors. It also acknowledges that various other measures, including traffic calming and reduction of speed and traffic volumes, are viable, dare I say, critical options for improving rider safety. Most significantly, the report recommends consideration of existing conditions, road use and the impact of traffic and parking changes on the community, as well as the impact on residents and businesses. Implicit in that recommendation is the need for flexibility in the approach to trying to increase the use of cycling as a transport method, which we're all 100% on board with, obviously. It's apparent from the experiences to date that seeking to retrofit protected bike corridors into established streets and their associated communities is complex, time-consuming and costly.
It's vital that these projects consider community amenity and practical considerations, as well as rider safety. The proposed amendment will enable Council to ensure that future projects are properly designed, taking into account all these complexities. The amendment to item 18 is a sensible, measured amendment which will enable Council to properly serve its community. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for respectful behaviour tonight. I know we have varied views on many of the topics tonight among councillors and among people listening online and in the gallery. I now call upon Julie Clutterbuck, speaking at 10.1.
Good evening. I'm Julie Clutterbuck. I live in Elwood, but I'm speaking tonight as the President of the Port Phillip Bicycle Users Group. I'm speaking to the proposal to change the integrated transport strategy. Currently, the key bike action is to build a network of protected bike lanes. This action is supported by the evidence which you've assembled in your agenda item, which shows this is the best way to improve safety for people on bikes and to enable people to ride more, particularly the young, elderly and women. It's also the most popular among Port Phillip residents, both in the initial consultation back when we created the ITS and in the recent consultation on the review, where protected bike lanes and better protection at intersections were the top actions supported. The proposal is to replace this by a range of interventions: green bike lanes, bike stencils, curb outstands, street art, and B, to advocate to state government to deliver protected bike corridors. These are two actions that have been expressly opposed by this council. The controversial pop-up trial delivered such interventions: sharrows, paint, no protected bike lanes, and this council demanded that they be ripped out. And last year, when the state government proposed delivering a protected bike lane on Kerford Road, in line with this council's own plan, this council advocated against it, not for it. It's a step backwards to change to a policy that is objectively less popular, less effective at achieving the goals that we all want to see, and above all, one that you've demonstrated absolutely no intention to implement. I'm asking you to keep the current strategy and also to get a move on in implementing it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Julie. I now call upon Dahlia Lucy, speaking to item 10.1. Hi, Dahlia.
Hello. Hi, I'm Dahlia Lutzi from St Kilda. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. The agenda item I'm addressing is item 10.1, Integrated Transport Strategy Review, Engagement Findings and Recommendations. I ask that councillors support the recommended change to action item 18. The report underpinning the recommendation to council notes the learnings from the project to date, and in particular the significant amounts of money these projects are costing. Given the budget position and the financial issues noted by the report, it seems to me that the recommendations are fiscally responsible and make clear that significant improvements can be achieved by looking at alternative solutions with a lower cost to taxpayers. The proposed recommendation will enable council to look at more creative and cost-effective solutions that balance the needs of all the community, instead of being locked into an expensive, one-size-only approach. Please support the proposed amendment to action item 18.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I call upon Phillip Edmonds, speaking to item 10.2. This is Pickles Street Safety Improvement Evaluation. Hello, Phillip.
Hi. Thank you, my councillors. My name is Phillip Edmonds and I'm from South Melbourne. I wanted to speak in support of the proposal to make permanent the median treatment in Pickles Street. The purpose of the trial was to address safety issues at a black spot intersection, and this has been sort of on the agenda and back and forth for more than a decade now. The trial has worked. The treatment has addressed those safety concerns. It's done so effectively, it's done so in a practical way, in a cost-effective way, without transporting the problem elsewhere. It's done so by eliminating the safety concerns rather than just shifting them, and there's been no material disruption to traffic flows. The trial has been exhaustive in trying to minimise knock-on effects, but you can't do something like this without some effects. Some substitution of access routes is required for some people because of this treatment, principally because of no right turn from Pickles to Bridge. However, as I think pointed out in the report, that is probably the most dangerous manoeuvre, inherently dangerous manoeuvre in this intersection, and so therefore using alternative access routes is reasonable in this case. I think that in supporting this, Council can honestly say no stone has been left unturned in seeking to minimise knock-on effects, and that really the knock-on effects are pretty minimal, whereas the safety improvement effects are substantial and have long been needed. So I just endorse the proposal to Council and ask that it be supported.
Thank you. Right, this is the last one I have. This is Jan Crosser joining us online. Jan, you're speaking to 13.1, the proposed lease of the Port Phillip EcoCentre in the St Kilda Botanical Gardens. Can you hear us? Hi, Jan.
Through you, Mayor, officers are attempting to get in touch with Jan. We haven't been able to at this stage, but I too will continue to try. I think that's our final speaker, though. So.
Sorry to hear we're not able to get a hold of you yet, Jan, but if you can keep trying, well, that is the end of the thing, unfortunately. All right. Is there anybody we've missed in the room who thought they were speaking tonight? If not, we will conclude the public question and submission time, and we'll move to the councillor question time. This is questions of general nature, not to items on the agenda tonight. Are there any questions? Councillor Pro?
Thanks very much. I've observed parking attendants have been working as school crossing supervisors recently. Can officers confirm if this is the case, and if so, what is the reason for it?
Brian T.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Council has about 30 schools or areas that require school crossing supervisors. At the moment, we do have about 29.5 covered, so they are well covered, but they are. It is a continuous struggle to keep those those positions filled. Some of the supervisors are older members of the community. They do get sick. Some are injured, do get injured, and this does create gaps, often at short notice. On those occasions, we are required to fill those gaps as a safety issue for people, for children attending those schools, and we do from time to time have to put parking enforcement officers in those roles. It is something we're reluctant to do. And it is something that we are conscious of and looking for other alternatives too. We've benchmarked with other councils and have found that they're in much the same position.
If I just ask a quick follow-up, I assume they're not issuing tickets unless under extreme circumstances?
They are not.
Be very efficient doing two roles at once. All right, any other questions tonight, councillors, of general nature? If not, we'll go on to ceiling schedule. Is Jan, am I being told Jan? Okay, I'm going to go back just because it's all right. Thank you. It's my choice. Jan, can you hear us? Jan, can you hear us? What? Nope. Okay. I'm sorry. She's not unmuting. Jan, do you see the icon that's a microphone? If you push it to unmute. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Oh, yeah, we can hear you. Okay. Jan, you have name, suburb, and 2 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much. Jan Costa, Middle Park. Thank you, Mayor and councillors. I'm the president of the Port Phillip EcoCentre, and firstly would like to thank you, the City of Port Phillip Council, for your ongoing support over the last 10 plus years to achieve the resources for the redevelopment of the EcoCentre. It's a very exciting time for us all as the new EcoCentre building takes shape. As you're aware, we at the EcoCentre had asked the City of Port Phillip for a long lease up to 21 years. This request for a long lease was to provide long-term stability for us to plan, build partnerships and networks, and implement an increasing range of programs to meet the challenges that we need to for a sustainable future for us all. We thank the Council for proposing a 15-year subsidised lease agreement between the Port Phillip EcoCentre and the City of Port Phillip, which we are pleased to support. So in conclusion, we at the EcoCentre look forward to the Council's continuing support and close working partnership as we expand our programs and services in our new EcoCentre to meet the increasing requests from our community and businesses and to tackle the challenges of climate change over the next 15 years. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, we'll go back to the same schedule. Councillors, we have no items for sealing on tonight's agenda. On to petitions and joint letters. Councillors, we have no petitions and joint letters on tonight's agenda. Anybody need a comfort break? Otherwise, we're good to go. Okay, we're going to go into presentation of reports. Pardon? Sorry? You want a break? Okay. All right. Hold on. Hold on. What time is it? 7:50. Come back at 8. 5 minutes? Okay, we'll come back at 8. Thank you. Sorry, I see your message now. Come back at 8 o'clock, please. All right, let's get started again. Thank you, everybody. All right, we're on to the presentation of reports. So, councillors, the first item is 8.1, presentation of the December CEO report, issue 103. Councillors, do you have any questions of this item? If not, I'm looking for someone to move this. Councillor Martin, and who would like to second it? Councillor Clark. Councillor Martin to speak to it?
I urge people to read it thoroughly, full of lots of good information.
Yes. Councillor Clark? No. Anybody else speaking to the item? We'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you. All right. On to one of the big items tonight, 9.1, aged care reforms, future model for endorsement. Councillors, we have an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to... Do we have any questions of the officers? Let's do this. Let's go to some questions. Councillors, who has a question for an officer in relation to this report? Is that a hand over there, Councillor Sirkoff?
Mayor. Whoops, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to ask a couple of questions of the officers. Can Council please comment or give assurance on if an accredited provider for in-house care service would be delivered by a not-for-profit organisation or a private organisation?
Through you, Mayor, I've been able to confirm directly with the Commonwealth that only not-for-profit providers have been approved for the delivery of services. In the instance where councils have relinquished services, no private providers have been appointed.
Thank you.
I have a question. We had somebody say, well, they might start out as not-for-profit and then they'll go to privatise. Do we know about any ways that that can be prevented?
Through you, Mayor, not that I'm aware of.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter?
Thank you, Mayor. Can I please get officers to clarify the use of the word private here seems to have been used interchangeably with for-profit. However, that's not my understanding of what the word private means. Can officers please clarify what they're talking about when they say private and that no private providers could be selected for this?
Through you, Mayor, my understanding of the differentiation between not-for-profit and private is they are making a profit on the delivery of those services. Not-for-profits, whilst they may make a profit, put that profit back into the delivery of services to clients.
The reason I asked this question, I've been receiving a number of emails.
Sorry, this is not a debate. Wait, hold on, I need to call on you.
Sorry.
I need to call on you. Councillor Baxter, do you know one?
Well, can I just ask a question, I guess, of the CEO? Because my understanding is that there's private and there's public. Public being, government-owned, and private being literally everything else, including not-for-profits. Do we have a council-wide, style guide that means that we use the term private interchangeably with for-profit?
CEO?
Through you, Mayor, no, we don't. I think the differentiation that the officer is trying to make is that there are usually three kinds of providers when you talk about it. You might have government providers, You might have not-for-profit providers and you might have commercial or for-profit or private providers. I take your point, but that's not the intention of the officer response tonight. And we don't have a style guide that suggests that there's a broad encapsulating term of a private provider, but to be very clear, we're talking about 3 different kinds of providers. There will be government providers, such as us, a council, not-for-profits, or commercial providers.
Councillor Baxter.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. I'll speak to that later. I have a question. If council relinquishes the home care services tonight, is it possible for them to be re-established by a future council?
Through you, Mayor, in the event that a future council wants to explore re-establishing in-home care services, thought would need to be given to a number of factors. Those include having the ability to sustain a model that is funded in arrears for services delivered, would need to have the ability to meet clinical governance and quality standards, have the ability to be competitive in an open marketplace, have the ability to meet the needs of clients with basic care needs all the way through to complex care needs and have the relevant qualified staff to do this. Potentially deliver other services such as allied health services and nursing services to ensure clients stayed with the same service throughout their ageing journey. Would need to register with the Commonwealth to be a support-at-home provider. Potentially support clients out of the catchment area to ensure the model was financially sustainable, build a new workforce and establish a new client management system, payment systems and marketing campaigns.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you very much for that information, and that largely accords with the information that has been given to us as the barriers to staying in as well. So they're largely the same in terms of staying in or getting back in the future. So just to clarify though, there's no legal reason that council couldn't re-establish these services. They'd still have to solve all the same problems that we would if we want to stay in, but there's no reason why we couldn't in the future. Is that right?
Through you, Mayor, that's correct.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm going to cut you off, Councillor Sirikoff, for more questions. Go ahead if you have another.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just wanting to inquire with council, and that is, how does the City of Port Phillip differ from councils like the one for Geelong in having the capacity and funding to deliver in-house aged care services? Is Geelong, as an example, better placed compared to the City of Port Phillip?
Through you, Mayor, Geelong Council is the largest provider of aged care services in that region, meaning that they have a thin market, which is not the case in COP, as we already have established aged care not-for-profit providers in our city. Geelong also have in place an operating model that includes the delivery of home care packages, which we currently don't deliver. And the home care packages are designed to support clients who have higher care needs and complex support needs, whereas the Commonwealth Home Support Program that we currently deliver just delivers supports to clients with entry-level and basic support care needs. City of Geelong also have a very large number of clients. They have around 3,000 clients that they currently deliver support to, so have quite sustainable framework on which to run their operating model.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillor Martin.
In dot point 3.4.10 states approves the implementation of the village model by no later than September 2024. Does that leave us open to a situation that they had in Verandah, where the City of Verandah was to exit all its aged care services on a particular date, handed them over to new providers, and the new providers were unable then to provide those services, and many of the aged care clients went without those services for some months? Or do we have a way of getting around that to make sure that there's never any gap in the provision of services?
Through you, Mayor, when the Commonwealth looks at appointing a panel of approved providers, one of the things I look for is the provider's ability to step into the marketplace quickly and have capacity to do that. We've been reaffirmed, the Commonwealth has reaffirmed that in the instance where a provider isn't ready to step into the space and pick up our clients, the council can remain delivering those services, even if it's post a proposed exit date, to ensure those clients receive continuity of care and there's no break in their service.
CEO.
Through you, Mayor, I was part of some of the conversations that we had with the Commonwealth. That was a key concern for me as well. the Commonwealth didn't have the same concerns they have had with some of the other councils, particularly where there hasn't been an established market. They were very clear in the City of Port Phillip. They did see that we had an established, mature, not-for-profit sector already providing services and well-placed, and some of the other places where it hasn't gone so well, they've been trying to establish those markets. In addition, we talked to them about what kind of time frame would be required to ensure successful transition, and what you've seen in the report tonight reflects that and their level of confidence around being able to support it.
Thank you. Councillor Pearl?
Just on that, it segues into my first question. Have we verified the Commonwealth's assumptions around the size of the market and the ability for the market to actually provide the services that will be put back into the market effectively if we withdraw these services? Have we tested their assumptions?
Through you, Mayor, I'll let Bridget answer that in more detail. What I would say is that we are a smaller player now. We were about 1,500 packages that we used to provide. We're down to about 600, and that's on the back of the reforms that have taken place already and people transitioning to existing suppliers. So the market has had capacity to take on the clients that we currently have been supporting historically.
Through you, Mayor, the market, the Commonwealth are confident that the market will have the capability to respond to delivering support to our clients. We have a neighbouring council, Stonington, who recently made a similar decision, and the Commonwealth were very confident that they could put in a panel of approved providers that could meet the unique characteristics of the Stonington community and deliver services.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl.
So, I get they're confident. Are we confident in their assumptions?
Through you, Mayor, we're confident in their assumptions based on our scan of the marketplace.
Thank you. Further questions? Last opportunity. All right. Councillors, we have an officer's report. Would someone like to move this or something else? Councillor Baxter?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move an alternative motion. Sure, yeah. Sorry, the other question I had is the estimation of the referral service in terms of the resourcing of that to me seems quite low. How will those people be able to manage the referral service? And have we applied sufficient resources?
So through you, Mayor, I just want to make a distinction. There are two different functions that we're talking about. We're talking about a community connector role that can have an ongoing and hopefully enduring presence in supporting older people as they navigate their ageing journey. And then we'll have a transition team. So in the instance that council makes a decision, a team will be stood up that will be more than one person. It could be 4 to 5 to 6, who will work one-on-one with those 650 clients, hold their hand, support them to choose a provider and transition them across to that provider. So they're two different functions. Just
to clarify, sorry, I used the word referral, I should use the word connector. I'm satisfied with the transition arrangements. I'm more focused on whether or not you think we're resourcing the connector role appropriately.
Yep. Through you, Mayor, being a new role, it is hard to determine what the need is. We know how many older people we have in the city. We don't know how many people will uptake the role of the connector. We've built in 1.4 EFT in this first instance, and then looking at a 12-month review process to see whether or not the role meets the needs of our older population.
CEO?
Sorry.
Through you, Mayor, and if demand was outstripping our ability to support it, I would, quickly make adjustments and recommendations for how we could adjust to that.
All right, we're into more questions. Councillor Sirikoff? Sorry.
I just want to confirm that, was it said in the report that that we would continue with the existing service until council has managed to transition all clients to whatever new service that they want to uptake?
Yep, through you, Mayor, the service will continue throughout that transition process. There'll be no break in service for clients.
Thank you very much, Bridget. Are there any further questions tonight? If not, as I said, Councillor Baxter, what would you like to move?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so I'll move an alternative recommendation, which might be on the screen.
An alt motion.
Yep.
That look right?
Yep. So essentially what it does is it that crosses off 1.4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7.
We're going to call it 3.4 just for
okay.
consistency.
Sorry, yep.
You're right.
Okay, it's going to cross off quite a lot of those things and replace it with defers any decision to relinquish back to the Commonwealth Home Support Program funded services to no later than August 2024 until Council receives a further detailed report on options for continuing to deliver CHSP in home services.
Okay, confirming everything else just struck out.
Everything else except for the last part that notes that the first three parts, noting and acknowledging, and the last part that notes the regional assessment service will cease on the 30th of June 2024, etc.
Got it, cool. All right, thank you. Would anybody like to second this? Councillor Nagri? Okay. Councillor Baxter, would you like to speak to this motion?
Yes, I would. Thank you. I'd like to talk a little bit about how we got here. So we've been having discussions for a few years now, really, about the potential changes that we might have to make, given that the changes that were coming in at the Commonwealth level around aged care funding, moving from a different system from the block funding to the arrears funding the model, as well as the types of services that we would be looking at. In that time, I feel like quite early on, a majority of councillors really wanted to go down the path of investigating exiting the service, what that would look like, what we would need to do, and how we could make sure that through exiting the service, we left as few people behind or falling through the cracks as possible. I was very much in the minority at that time that basically felt that I don't think that we should have investigated. We could investigate. I don't think we should have gone down that path of exiting the service. I would have preferred to actually look at ways that we could not only continue to provide the services that we provide that are, as we've heard, are extremely valued, but also expand our services in this area. To me, it comes down, I think, to a difference in vision for what government in general, or local government in particular, does for our community. For me, I see aged care services, whether they be in-home services or other services that we provide, as essential services, much like childcare services or libraries or roads, rates and rubbish are. I see those as being core to what we do as a council, because they're about supporting our community. It's about allowing them to maintain their dignity and maintain their connection with the rest of their community, right? And although state and federal governments are able to do all sorts of things to support communities, I really think local government is the one that's job is to actually bring people together and help people remain connected when, particularly when people need help. And that's why I think we need to continue to provide services for everybody who's vulnerable in any way at any time of their life, whether that be permanently or temporarily or whatever. If they need help, we should be there. I think that for quite a long time, not just in this council but across the local government sector, due to rate capping and zealous rate cutting councillors and so on, there's been a push to run down these services rather than maintain them, have pride in them, expand them and make them sustainable. And when you do that over a prolonged period of time, there's absolutely no surprise when you end up in an area, in a point where your officers are telling you, we are not well enough equipped to stay in this service and provide it at the kind of level that we need to be. Well, yeah, of course, because we've actually run it down over such a long period of time. It's always been the easiest thing to cut or overlook or, not consider for expansion because, we're being nickel and dimed all the time here in local government. But I do think that we need to really look at what this is here. This is what we're considering here, not with my motion, and my motion is to oppose this, but what we're considering here is the actual privatisation of these services. And that's why I had a bit of an exchange there about the term private. I think it's actually really important to note that there are public services and there are private services, right? Private services can be provided by for-profit entities, commercial entities, or not-for-profit entities. And I'm very familiar with not-for-profit organisations. I tend to work for not-for-profits in my working life and have worked in residential aged care myself. And although these are run by not-for-profit organisations, I would never ever say that they're anything but private services, right? And they, not-for-profit services suffer from many of the same issues that for-profit services do when it comes to how you manage your workforce, how you can try and rub two pennies together to make more and try and get more out of that service. I do think that a not-for-profit service is going to provide a better and less focused on the bottom line service, of course, but regardless of whether we're talking about relinquishing these services back to the Commonwealth and then having them distributed to not-for-profits or for-profits, it is the same in many, many ways. There are some important differences, but it is a process of privatisation and all the things that come along with that. One of those, for example, is the experience of staff in the not-for-profit sector. Like I said, I've worked in that sector, and the capacity, the ability for people to be underpaid, overworked, undertrained, and expected to do things well beyond their means is just as prevalent in the not-for-profit world as it is in the for-profit world when it comes to care for people. Now, that's not everywhere. There are some organisations that maintain a really high quality of care for people, and I've seen them, and I absolutely understand that is the case. But I've also seen, whether it be not-for-profit or for-profit, the opposite as well. I've heard stories, first-hand stories of carers who have had to drive to Frankston for a 1 hour, session with someone and then drive, back to the northern suburbs for their next one and then back to Brighton for the one after that, which is, 5 hours of driving for 3 hours, of work for these people. That was for a not-for-profit. That was not for a for-profit. How can people who are put under that sort of pressure properly focus on quality care for the actual people receiving the services? Many times they do, and they make their own sacrifices in order to make sure that care is provided, but that is not fair to me for the staff. What the staff, I believe, need are good quality, secure jobs in a big enough organisation that can, sustain that and make sure that they have guaranteed work. We did a consultation not too long ago where we went out to the community in general, but mostly people who are, related to aged care services, either receivers or adjacent to that, to ask really what should exiting look like and what would that mean to you? And I don't want to impugn any of our officers. Those are essentially the instructions that were given to them by the council to say this is the kind of engagement that you should undertake. But it was not an engagement about, hey, we've got a problem here. We're struggling to we're going to struggle to properly fund high quality care for people when we make this transition to the new Commonwealth system. This is the problem. How can we work together to try and solve it? What changes should we make? How do you as a community feel about this? And perhaps one of those options could have been exiting, all right? But instead it was, we're going to exit, and what should that look like? Funnily enough, when we did that consultation, the main response that came back was don't don't exit, right? Which is extraordinary when that question wasn't asked, right? And that just goes to show just how strongly our community feels about us being in this space. Now, while there are certainly challenges, and we've heard a list of things that would need to be resolved if we were to stay in this service or re-enter it after, after some time potentially. We do know that there are ways, if those issues are resolved, that council can continue to provide these services, potentially expand them in a way that can be sustainable and effective. We've seen models in other councils where they're able to do this right. We don't have what those councils have right now, and we're not able to do what they do right now. But I think it's important that we invest in getting to where they are so that we can do that. I will say that these conversations that we have around cost are continually brought on by the straitened conditions that we find ourselves in, and one of those is the decision that was made last year, quite irresponsibly, without any associated budget cuts, to cut millions of dollars from our revenue and $10 million over the next few years through a tiny rate cut that would have put, a couple of dollars back in people's pockets, but is one of the contributing factors to us having to have conversations like, can we afford to provide aged care services to some of the most vulnerable people in our community? This, I think, is what we need to think about when we're having those conversations. It is not just a matter of, oh yes, let's just, erode our revenue base. It's what does that mean as we go forward? What are the things that are affected? Well, it's these kind of things. I do think that my motion, which is about deferring this decision and making sure that we get proper information and properly modelled options for how we can get to where some of those other councils are so that we could potentially make decisions about staying in. I do think that is the way to go. I will say that I do totally appreciate the work that the officers have done, particularly in developing the village model and talking about the connector. But to me, that connector role, if we were to exit the service, is extremely important. You have to connect people who are disconnected, right? And I think the establishment of that connector role implies and acknowledges that there would be a serious disconnection from us exiting from these services. It's about mitigating the damage. My motion is about how about we try not to inflict that damage in the first place. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Niagri.
It's definitely been a very difficult 6 months discussing these reforms, and I will echo everything that Councillor Baxter has said and probably say it a little bit quicker because he's covered so much and I don't need to repeat him. But I think it's firstly important just to emphasise what this motion is. Not a motion to decide to stay in, it's a motion to decide to properly investigate that as an option. Because once we go down the road of leaving and stepping out, it does become more difficult to find a way to provide aged care services in the future. And this is a service that's been provided for decades in different forms. We have some of the councils in Victoria that were the innovators and leaders in this space. And it's kind of important to note that Victoria is the only state in Australia that has councils providing this kind of aged care services. We're kind of unique in that way, and something I think we should be really proud of, and it's because of the legacy of City of St Kilda, City of South Melbourne, City of Port Melbourne, I believe City of South Melbourne in particular, that we have those services and we have this community support being delivered by a government agency. And I think you've got to think long and hard before these kind of changes. This is probably the biggest, one of the most significant changes that we'll think about in this council. And when I think about a few different parts to it. Obviously, the first people I think about are the clients, our older residents who are using this service. And I'm kind of depressed to feel when I read these reports, it's never stated directly, but there's a sense that we were kind of walking toward this for a long time, that we've been scaling down for a long time, that every client has been kind of waiting for the moment when we finally admitted that we did want to drop these services and punt them off to non-profits and potentially private for-profit providers. And that's kind of depressing because the feedback from every single person I've ever spoken to who receives these services is they talk about how fantastic they are. And they don't just talk about that, they talk about the difference between these services and the ones provided by non-profits and for-profits. And the difference is that care, that compassion, that connection. When you have well-skilled, well-funded, well-supported workers working with people in our community and taking the time, it made the world of difference. One of the best stories I heard was a client of our service had to go to hospital, and the worker, who I think was just usually helping them with groceries, called them every day in the hospital. Every day. They didn't need to do that. But I don't know if that person had anybody else calling them while they were in hospital. And those kind of connections are the things that ultimately determine people's quality of life. And I think there's nothing that we can do as government more important than to determine people's quality of life and make them better. I also think about the workers. And I've felt that there was this kind of creeping sense that the workers were kind of waiting for or almost welcoming being made redundant. And I find that bizarre because I've never met a worker who wanted to be made redundant if they were passionate about their job. And all the workers I've spoken to in these spaces, they're super passionate about it. Every care worker is. They love the work that they do. It's a really difficult space. They're not well paid often. And it's a difficult operating environment and often really difficult social situations, right? You're dealing with people in age and decline, which is hard. But they're very passionate about that. And we're one of those providers that provides, I think, often better support to workers. And we know that it's much more difficult to get those kind of outcomes in the non-profit sector. I just can't see a way that if we leave, that workers will be better off. You can discuss the quality for clients and that will be debated and it's much more difficult to quantify, but I just don't see any examples of that across all care industries, childcare, aged care, disability. As soon as they're out in non-profit providers, the outcomes are much more difficult. It's much more difficult for workers to unionise, and it's much more difficult for workers to get the kind of support and wage outcomes that they need. I also think about the peers in this case. We have other councils, and they do other things too. We often get stuck in our little bubble, and the thing I found frustrating was beyond looking at Bayside, it wasn't really until the last couple of weeks that we started talking about the fact that there are actually, I think, 77 other councils in Victoria. And some of them are making, as it turns out, the exact same decision because they're in the same boat as us. And a number of them have made the decision, the active decision, to stay in and to invest in this space. And I don't think we've fully explored that enough. But one of the things that seems to keep coming up again and again is ultimately a decision around commitment, a decision around whether or not you want to scale up and try to make it work. And that's a decision that a number of councils have made. It takes time, it takes money, but it's not impossible. Councils are doing it, and they're doing it with success. I've heard about some great success, particularly in places like Kingston, where the community are actually embracing it. It's quite a profitable and supported service because people are voting with their feet. They want a government-run service. And ultimately, I think about the fact that ultimately we sort of set different priorities across council terms, and we never really went out to the council community across Port Phillip and said, do you want us to privatise this service? And when we hear the feedback, it's almost always, please don't do that. And we ultimately made choices in the past to not do that. We made that decision with childcare. I wasn't on council yet, but thankfully my colleagues did see fit in the end to stump up more money and find a way to make it work. We can do these kind of things. It's ultimately a matter of priorities. And all we're asking tonight is that we spend a little bit more time to properly cost and evaluate the option of staying in and find a way, if it's possible, to do so. The last thing I would add is the timelines have been pushed out. When we were first talking about this 6 months ago, we were staring down initially, I think it was a year, then it became 2. It's now a full 3 and a bit years before we have to make this final decision. That does give us the time to really seriously think about and try to scale up. And look, you know, potentially it's not possible. Potentially it's not possible. But I can't say that to you with certainty. I can't say that to you with a full stop at the end of the sentence because we don't know. We haven't actually tried yet. And I would like us to at least, at the very first step, look at trying before we actually try. I'd also like us to try. But all we're asking tonight is that we defer for 6 months and we actually look at whether this is possible. And then we can come back in maybe not 6 months, maybe sooner than that, and have another conversation with our community about whether that is something we want to do, whether we want to scale up and step into this space, or whether we do, in fact, want to step out.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak to this part? All right, we're ready to go to the vote? Okay. Do you want to speak to it? Councillor Crawford?
You know, I do feel like I've failed on this one. I don't think I grasped the enormity of this early enough in the term to have put enough time and energy and thought and investigation into it. So I do apologise. I think I don't know why, but at the time it sat uncomfortably with me, but I didn't ask all the right questions. But this is where we're at now, and I would like the opportunity to ask the right questions and see if we can stay in, knowing more now, knowing more each week than I did at the start of this process. Look, you know, we often argue as a group that we should listen to the community, that the community has spoken. And often when people pose that argument, it's 50-50. So part of our community is for it and the other part's not. But this one is different. We have not yet anyone saying, yeah, we want you to get out and we want you to go to this other model. So we are here sitting to make a decision that nobody in our community wants. And as I said, it sits very uncomfortably with me. And that's aside from the actual issue of providing home care services. Look, I know it's complicated. It would require investment, rethinking, a different vision. But I guess, councillors, we still have time to make that different, or at least explore that different outcome. There's also room to advocate to our federal counterparts for the government to fund council staying in, given the unique situation here in Victoria. And them pushing back the timelines is actually part of the problem for councils, because it's always been unclear, and that has made it harder for officers and councillors to make this decision. And now it's not just 1 year, it's 3 years. And I feel like there's a lot of water to go under the bridge before we get to the final outcome on this. And I think there's real opportunities still. And so I would urge my federal counterparts and to work with them to look at those opportunities. We know that outsourcing doesn't always work, and often doesn't when it comes to essential services, because once it's outsourced, it's hard to get the outcomes or have much impact on what we want to achieve for our community. Now, if we're at the point where we had to make the decision for June 2024, I'd probably be making a different decision given the timeline, but the timeline has shifted. Not ideally for us, but it has. So we still have that longer road to explore. I know that uncertainty is hard, particularly on some of our employees, and I do apologise. Again, I don't think I engaged or didn't get it. I think as a councillor, you don't always get it until you get more information, and we are here to make the best decisions we can with the information we have. Now, we spend a lot of money on buildings, but I think in this instance the investment needs to be in people, in our residents, in our staff, because that's what actually supports, creates and develops community. You can meet people to pick up rubbish on the beach and build a community. You don't. So sometimes the building is less important than the facilitation of where people can meet and have community and feel connected. So I think that's where I want to stop. I urge you, councillors, I know it is not an ideal situation in many to be at this late point, but we still have opportunity. And I think I urge you to not miss that opportunity to actually look at staying in as a possible option.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
I agree with 90% of what my three colleagues have said, but I'm going to come to a different conclusion extraordinarily reluctantly, and I'll explain why. Firstly, I take Councillor Crawford's point. If we knew 12 months ago what we know now, we may not be in the situation that we are in now, but we are in this situation. We're in a situation where over the last few years our number of clients has dwindled from 1,500 to 600. We're in a situation where we've got our staff in particular, who I really, really feel for, who are in an extraordinarily awkward position where they're uncertain about their job futures. I've got to be a little careful as to how I make my decisions, given that of all the council, I'm the one who's closest to needing to access in-home care, and I've got a number of friends of mine who are currently users of the current service. When I speak to them, they tell me when our staff talk to them, and their staff are talking about how they're going to be losing their jobs, they're saying that the services aren't being provided as regularly as they have been in recent years, simply because we don't have enough staff available, because we're losing staff, staff are taking leave. We probably should never have got into this situation. As I said, if I'd understood 12 months ago what I've learned over the last 12 months, I think I would have been trying far harder to extend the service that we currently do with our existing staff and build it up rather than let it run down. Given that we're in this situation, though, and as a member of, or as the council's rep on OPAC, I've probably spent more time investigating the alternatives that have been put up. I believe that it's probably better, reluctantly, for our staff to say, rather than keep you around for 6 months with no certainty that you're going to still have a job in 6 months, better to let them know now what's going to happen. And secondly, given that the service has been running itself down, if we do make a decision now, we can very quickly try and build it back up to standard. And that there are providers out there, I believe, who can do it. And with the question that I asked earlier, if there are providers, if there aren't sufficient providers in a particular area, council's able to keep the current tasks on indefinitely in those areas where we can't find appropriate people. The safest thing, I think, is to reject this motion. However, I'm not fully comfortable with everything that's there in the officer's recommendation. So if this motion is lost, I'm going to move an amended version of the officer's rec to try to pick up on a number of the concerns that my three colleagues have made, and they're very, very valid concerns. I'm torn apart by what I'm saying here because it's, yeah. In many ways, I'd like to be able to not keep our status quo, but turn the clock back 12 months so we could rebuild and not be here where we are now. But given that we are here, I'm not going to be supporting very, very reluctantly this motion, but I will be putting up an amended motion of the officer's rec, which I hope will address at least some of the concerns that many of the people have raised, both in public question time and the comments that my three colleagues have just made.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to the item? Councillor Clark, is that you now? All right. Hold on, let me just see. Anybody else speaking to it? Nope. All right, then go ahead and close. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'll make...
Sorry. You know what? I'll speak to it. Sorry.
Okay.
I think about myself. Sorry. All right. Thank you. I do think it's very challenging where we find ourselves for all the reasons given, and had we had different dates given to us a long time ago, or known more information up front back in 2021 when this all was announced from the Royal Commission, we possibly would be in a different location than we are now. It's really lovely to hear the wonderful stories and standard of care that Council offers. I think that's across the board in many of our services, and excellent that it's in the aged care as well. And it's definitely not a decision made lightly by anybody in the room tonight. It makes us feel very much like the bad guys, but it's also the role that we're given to make decisions on behalf of the Council, and this is the topic tonight. I do find I have a lot of proper information. I respect how the team has run this and given us all the information to date. So thank you very much. It's been quite a learning journey. I know that across the time we haven't had all the information until about now, and there is some, in hindsight, it would have been good, but I don't really recall many people or ever an oath of motion this term of Council driving this path, and so we have gotten to where we are now because the majority have come here. No one, yeah, okay, never mind. Let me take that back. Okay, don't want to upset anybody. We have, what we're being told is that there were people who were our clients. Then the market is already established and they're taking as clients. So at this point, to claw it back is going to be very hard. And I understand that the request in this motion tonight is to just explore it. Let's hear a little bit more about it. But the farther we delay this decision, the harder it seems to be getting. And I think I have the information tonight about what the federal government information, what's being required by reform. It's not just a council decision, it's a reform put down from the federal government, and how we're positioned in the city of Port Phillip, that I'm fairly comfortable with what is being proposed with the amendment I think may be brought tonight that might be the right model. So thank you for the rambling. Sorry for the rambling, but I think we're ready to go to the vote, or to close. Ready to close. Long day. Councillor Baxter, to close.
Thank you, Mayor. And I do understand that for some councillors this is a difficult decision, and I understand that some councillors will vote in a different way than I'm going to vote. I thank you, Mayor, for you explaining your position and defending your position. I note that not every councillor has done that, but they don't have to do that either, right? What I will say, though, is that our community will hold us accountable for the decisions that we make and the votes that we make. And I really would implore councillors, we're asking for something very simple here. We've got the time to do this. We've potentially, you know, I think we've got the money to do this. We always have this conversation where, you know, CapEx, we seem to be able to spend huge amounts of money, but OpEx always seems to be, you know, nickel and diming. But I really think that we can do this, and our community expects us to properly interrogate this and properly present them with the real options, rather than the road we've been going down. So please, councillors, I hope you will vote for this motion. And Mayor, can I just ask that the voting be done on division?
Sure, thank you. All right, then we're ready for the vote. All those in favour of the alt motion? So Councillor Crawford, Councillor Baxter, Councillor Nyagui. All those against the alt motion? Councillor Clark, Councillor Martin, Councillor Kinsella, Councillor Pearl, Councillor Sirikoff, and Councillor Bond. That is, the motion's failed. Would anybody like to move? I heard a foreshadowing to move an alternative motion. Councillor Martin?
I'd like to move the officers' rec with an amendment. Would you like me to read out the amendment?
Yes, please.
Okay, in item 3.4.6, it would now read, establishes a community connector system that will provide older people with a single point of contact for council to support them to navigate the aged care system, whether that be to link them with the Commonwealth Government Support at Home program or to access other activities and supports in the city to assist them to age well. Council will continue to be a first point of call for community members requesting this type of support, and the Community Connector service will be reviewed after 12 months to ensure it is delivering its role effectively. So that's the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Would someone like to second that? If not, I'll second it. Councillor Martin to move. Councillor Kinsella to second. Yes. Councillor Pearl.
Councillor Martin, if you could clarify the 12 months and why you've picked 12 months. It seems quite a long time. If there were problems to arise, I'm not sure there's much we could do effectively to rectify them after 12 months.
I'd be happy to accept your point of view, 12 months or earlier if circumstances indicate. Is that a reasonable thing to include? Or earlier if circumstances warrant?
Hold on, let me just ask Sia. What? Yeah, go for it, please.
Through you, Mayor, it would be my intention to monitor this closely from the start of implementation, and if we need to make adjustments, we wouldn't wait for a detailed review. I think in discussing the idea around review after 12 months, that will be in time to understand how the service is operating overall, how it's going in the market, how the transition to other services has worked out. But my commitment would be that I would review this constantly and, if need be, come back to council with recommendations to make adjustments as required.
So from a motion point of view, the 12 months staying there doesn't change your constant review. So it can be in or out, doesn't matter.
The 12 months would be a more detailed point in time review, but we will constantly monitor how we're performing.
Sure. Councillor Martin, what would you like to move?
Just to clarify for me, Mayor, I wasn't suggesting you change it. I was just asking for why it was 12 months, and you've satisfied that question.
No problems.
I'm happy to second it. So, Councillor Clark, do you have a clarifying question?
Yes, if I can.
Yes.
It was my understanding that this connector service was to be reviewed after 12 months anyway. That was part of the original program that we were putting in place.
Councillor.
Through you, Mayor, that was part of the discussions that we had. It's not expressly in the motion.
Right, okay.
Okay. Councillor Martin, you can speak to it.
A question over here.
Oh, sorry, you have a clarifying question, Councillor Sirikov?
Thank you. To clarify that, and that 12 months review is different to providing the community sector service for 12 months or longer, such as the 12 to 18 months or longer, for how long it's required. So that this is a different, it's just reviewing the 12 months, after 12 months.
See you.
Through you, Mayor, the intention is that at this stage that service would be ongoing. There's no time limit that's been placed on it, but we would review it after 12 months to make sure it was working effectively and efficiently.
Thank you. All right. Any further clarifying questions? Otherwise, we'll move on. Councillor Martin, you can speak to it.
Thank you, Mayor. I've been fortunate enough to be the Council's nominee on the Older Persons Advisory Committee, who are one of the most informed and educated and concerned group of people I've been fortunate enough to work with in all my time in public life. And they've been working and having long-term discussions with our council officers as these aged care reforms have been debated. And I can't speak for them, but I've mentioned in speaking to the previous motion that had we had all the learnings that we had 12 months ago now, we may not be in the situation we are. But given that we are, I know that the Older Person Advisory Committee, separately to me, because I exempted myself from their last meetings when they developed their proposal. I didn't want to be seen as leading or having influence on them, but I fully agree with everything that they've said in their report. And in their report, they've said that ideally they would like to see Council's original program stay and be modified. But under the circumstances, if there are to be changes, the thing that they're most concerned about is that Council demonstrates very clearly its long-term and its ongoing commitment to aged care, to positive ageing, to us making sure that Council currently is the trusted source of information for our older people, and probably if there's any one group in our community who really do value Council's advice and the services Council provides, or in this case oversee, it's our older people. And we not only don't we want them to lose that faith, but we want to put in place structures that will increase their confidence that Council will be the first point of call for them, so that whenever they've got any issues dealing with aged care, and as we've seen here, whether it's accessing in-home care, triaging in-home care, if we are going to go to non-for-profit providers, to be helped in determining which of those providers are the one that's most suitable for them. If in fact the need isn't going to be in-home care, but they might need low-level care, residential care, that Council won't be organising that for them, but we'll be triaging them and directing them in the right place, so that we will be the major point of reference for our older people for any sort of concerns that they have about looking after their well-being. Now, wind the clock back 2 years. If we as a council had been in a position 2 years ago to be able to say we could deliver not just the services we're doing, but some more of the ones that I've just talked about, that would be, I think, an ideal situation. But I think that bird has long since flown, and under the circumstances, we can still manage to do all that if this community connector role, along with the other areas in council that continue to work with aged care, the people who work with our linking neighbours team, the council officers support OPAC, for example, so that really what we'll have is a connector role supported by other people, so we'll have an active, positive ageing team. And as our council officers have said, that positive ageing team would include the connector role, the linking neighbours program, the seniors festival, health and wellbeing officers and so on. If we're able to do that, then I have confidence that our council, demonstrating its extreme concern for our older citizens, will be able to make sure that any organisations that are working with our aged care citizens are kept up to the mark and will be delivering a standard of care that we would be comfortable with providing if we were delivering it ourselves, so that Our older people will not be disadvantaged by any change that happen out of this. And if we get it right, and I hope we can get it right, in fact, they're going to be better served by their council in 12 months' time than they currently are now, because they won't just be going to council for initial information about the in-home care services that they currently need, but the council will be providing a much wider range of support in helping them navigate the intricacies of the various services that are out there that are designed to look after people, our older people who need those services, and that will include liaising with the non-for-profit providers who will be delivering some of the services that we've talked about, in providing the services that current council is going to continue on, our Meals on Wheels program, our community bus program, I should say, our Linking Neighbours, other programs like that. So if we get this right, then we're going to be, we older people, and I'm one of them, will be in a better position than we currently are now. It's going to take a lot of work. I know our council officers are committed to delivering in this area. OPAC's had many, many meetings with them, and I know that they're going to be working with OPAC to ensure that this new program is rolled out in an effective and an appropriate way, reviewed. The connector role will continue to be reviewed so that in 12 months' time, when we come back to the review, hopefully we'll be able to sit down and say, look, this has gone well. We think we're in a better position than we were, but we can still do better as we continue to demonstrate that we as a council are not going to wash our hands of those of us who are over the age of 65 or 60, whatever the age cutoff is, but we'll be continuing to demonstrate our high level of care and continue to keep the trust of our older people and demonstrate that we are very actively supporting their needs. So I wish I wasn't moving this motion. I wish 2 years ago we'd understood a whole lot more and we'd be in a different situation. But under the circumstances, I believe this is the best thing that we can do at the moment to make sure that our older people are supported in the way that we all believe they should be.
Thank you. I'll follow on saying I think this is the most realistic, best outcome, a model opportunity that other councils haven't considered a connector role, for example, and it is an excellent opportunity for that, helping people navigate the system. It's quite confusing. There's a lot of emotion normally when people are entering into it, so that's just one aspect of the connector role, is that constant the phone call away to know what to do first and point them in the direction, not just of the services would no longer be providing, but also about the things we still provide. All of our great seniors festival, everything is a part of the positive aging strategy that we really are committed in this council. And the advice of the Older Persons Advisory Committee has been vital in this. I really appreciate the amount of time that advisory committee has put to this, and it's shaped the proposal. And I think it's a good one. And we can look as we go. I think the review will be very important to make sure that it has enough resources around it, because at this point, we just have to make an estimate about the uptake and the amount. So thank you for bringing this amendment or alt motion, Councillor Martin, and I'll be supporting it tonight. Would anybody else like to speak to this? Councillor Sirkoff?
Thank you, Mayor. Council's review of the aged care program has identified that Council is unfortunately not well placed to continue to deliver in-home services under the new supported home program. And I think 2 weeks ago in the CEO's report, the CEO did lay out a number of issues that Council is facing when we go down the road of what the new aged care reform is offering. And in that report, the CEO does report that currently the Council is under-delivering on services in the aged care sector. Council does not have the scale of efficiencies of operations, the breadth of service offerings, clinical capabilities or quality systems to respond to the implementation of the supported home program. Council is unable to acquire and retain staff to meet new requirements to deliver a wide range of services, from the new entry level services through to the high care, which would be prohibitive. Council is reporting that it is difficult to compete in the marketplace for staffing. And Council is facing industry resourcing challenges along with the growing cost of delivering services above funding rates. Through this review, there has not been a lack of consultation with the community. Council officers have engaged with the community members from feedback at a number of places. There's been 8 pop-up stalls across the city of Port Phillip. There's been 3 library sessions for feedback, along with council officers engaging with the Older Persons Advisory Committee, the Multicultural Advisory Committee, the LGBTIQ Advisory Committee, and the Greek, Polish and Jewish groups, to name a few. So there hasn't been a lack of interest or concern of what these changes will bring to the community. And so taking on board all of that feedback and all the challenges that this council has to face, we've come to basically what we have tonight with the motion. And the one great thing that has come about with the motion is that officers have brought to the councillors through a number of quite detailed briefings that the village model will be the best way to go, and it will. And by having the community connector service, this will underpin what the village model will be serving the community with. The service will have dedicated council staff to help clients transition from their existing care services to the new supported home program with increased choice and control for each client. And council sees no extra costs for the individual. I am concerned that some vulnerable elderly residents have been told that their aged care service will be cut. This is not true. The community connector is there to maintain their continuity of care. Council will continue to provide some of the existing services. That is the group social support, transport, delivered meals, and an improved and renewed hop-on, hop-off bus services, which was also reported in tonight's CEO report. It's going to make more information of the timetables, the frequencies, new locations that are more suitable for senior people to hop on, hop off the buses. The community connector is there so that no person will fall between the cracks as they transition. I'm supportive, and I want to say thank you to Councillor Martin for making this amendment to make it more clear that the community connector is going to be there to help everybody in every way. So I'm supportive of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to the item? Councillor Crawford?
I may vote to support this because I want to have the connector role. It's not because this is my ideal option, but I do want to ensure that we are still looking after older residents in this community to whatever capacity we can and to the full extent that we can. So I just wanted to put that on the record. My priority would be to stay in, but since that is no longer on the table, I do want to ensure that the connector role is fully funded, fully supported, and we make sure we look after our old residents.
Thank you. Last call to speak to this. Councillor Pearl.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Thank you to Councillor Martin for your amendment here this evening and also your leadership on this issue. Personally, as an individual councillor, I've been heavily influenced by your involvement in the briefings behind the scenes and also the information that you've been able to convey back and forth with the Older Persons Consultative Committee, which has informed the officer's recommendations significantly, and obviously your amendment here tonight. This is an enormous decision. It's a very hard decision. And it's been diligently considered as the landscape has changed substantially over the past 2 years by all councillors. So I'll just wait for the gallery to stop.
Thank you.
This will have a significant impact on people's lives, and that's not something that should be underestimated. I think when we've been talking about sufficient transition, I'm very confident the transition will be fine, but there will be people, and we most of us in this room at these tables or in the gallery would understand that people in this demographic don't always deal with change the best, and changes in circumstances at a point in terms of where their lives are in potential difficulty through health concerns, etc. Small changes can have an enormous impact on people's lives, particularly when they're in vulnerable situations, which these people, a lot of them are. And that's not something I weigh on lightly at all. Ultimately, we're indicating there's no break in service. There won't be a break in service probably, but there will be a significant change in service. And for some people that will be a positive, and I suspect for some people that will be a negative. We have to make sure as we make this change that we have diligent reviews and that we as councillors don't take our eye off the ball, so to speak, to ensure that that is actually being undertaken should this motion pass here this evening. It's a difficult decision, but on balance I think this is the right decision. And again, it's been heavily informed by the consultation that's been done, albeit I understand the negative feedback and the legitimate negative feedback on some of the limitations of that consultation. And I accept that. But on balance, I think this is the right decision. And again, I thank councillors for their diligent decision making, and particularly Councillor Martin for bringing the motion here this evening.
Thank you. Another call for speakers on this? If not, Councillor Martin, would you like to close?
I'd like to start off by noting that if this motion is passed, it's going to have a very, very significant impact on some of our wonderful, dedicated and some of them long-serving staff. And when I've been speaking to our older people, if there's one thing that they all say, it's they've really welcomed the friendship and the support of our council officers who've been working in the aged care area. And I just like to first I'd like to put on the public record my thanks to those people who've been working in that area for so long, and I know that the older people who they've supported have really valued their support. And again, I'd like to reiterate, I just wish the circumstances were different, and I felt more confident that we could have so if the situation had allowed us, I would have been much more comfortable if we were able to build our existing service to make it bigger and better rather than move to a new model. I just don't believe that the circumstances are there. But yeah, on the record, my thanks to the wonderful council staff who are going to be significantly impacted, and also my thanks to the officers who've been involved in this delicate process. And the ground's changed a number of times over the last 12 months as we've been debating what to do. And the OPAC briefings we've had have seen the proposed model change, and I'd like to acknowledge the support of my OPAC colleagues who've been providing advice to officers and help them come to. And there have been a number of recommendations that have been taken up by our officers from OPAC that I think have made their final recommendations far more workable and far more effective in looking after the interests of our older people than they would have been if I hadn't had those colleagues. So I'd just like to put those thanks on the record. And my final comment yet again is, with the wisdom of hindsight, I wish we hadn't got ourselves into a situation where we'd have to have this debate and make the decision that I think we're about to make. But I personally don't believe that there's any other way under the current circumstance that we can guarantee the best possible level of service to older people other than what we're about to do.
Thank you. All right, the debate's come to a close. It's time to go to the vote. All those in favour? And all those against? All right, that's carried.
Request a division, please, May.
All right, we're going to do division. I got to switch my hands. Hold on. All those in favour? All right, Clark, Martin, Consolo, Pearl, Sirikoff, Bond. All those against? Crawford, Baxter, Niagri. Thank you. That's carried. All right. Thank you, everybody, for a respectful debate. We'll move on to 10.1. This is the Integrated Transport Strategy Review, Engagement Findings and Recommendations. I'll give 1 minute for the gallery to clear for those who need to leave. Thank you for coming. All right, we'll continue. Again, we're on to 10.1. This is the Integrated Transport Strategy Review for the engagement findings and recommendations. All right, councillors, do you have any questions of the officers in relation to the report? Councillor Sirikoff?
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a question regarding Action 18A, if Officer could please respond. So within 18A, it does refer to a deliver a range of interventions. Does this only refer to the type of interventions described in paragraph 4.15, and does it exclude protected bike corridors?
Brian T.
Thank you, Councillor. No, it does not exclude protected bike corridors. Currently, the policy provides for 11 bike corridors with protected bike lanes. What the review found is that this option may not be appropriate in all circumstances, and that a bespoke option might be appropriate that takes into account things like traffic crashes, speed of vehicles, loss of parking, impacts on businesses, waste, impact on waste delivery or emergency vehicles before deciding how to progress. And the options then for each of those corridors could include a protected bike corridor, but may alternatively, or indeed in addition, include things like a painted bike lane markings, requiring low speeds of vehicles, curb out stands, signage and other interventions.
So does that basically means that a dedicated bike corridor would depend on the context of the situation, whether you go for a dedicated bike corridor or you go for some other type of treatment for the bike lane?
Through you, Mayor. Yes, that's right. It would be one of a suite of options that would be considered depending on the context, as you've indicated, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? You have a question? Councillor Crawford?
So would it be helpful in terms for officers to have an amendment that specified that it does include the option of protected bike lanes, to make sure that there's no, or maybe it's not for officers, for community to understand that it's not excluding? I mean, maybe that's a political question, but could it be useful for clarity to make sure that that it's specified that protected bike lanes could be part of those interventions?
Brian G.
Through you, Mayor. It is intended to be an option. Expressing that, making that explicit might make that clearer.
All right. Any further questions tonight? All right. We have an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something else? Okay, you could just... Or, yes, Councillor Bond got his hand up before you. So, Councillor Bond, and who would like to second it? Councillor Clark. Right. Councillor Bond.
I'm curious to find out what the amendment is, given it hasn't been circulated. Look, this is one of those situations where we're not excluding separated bike lanes here, but we are recognising that these separated bike lanes get significant pushback from our community, and it's not a minority; it's an overwhelming majority who don't like them because of the impact it has on their very immediate neighbourhood, and that's something we as a council need to recognise. And if we can install separated bike lanes in the appropriate locations with minimal pushback from the community, which of course we can look at that. But when in the instances that I think were talked about tonight, namely the pop-up bike lanes, they got considerable pushback from our community. It was overwhelming that they were just not safe and not appropriate for the streets that they were installed in. So that's why they were removed. They weren't removed because we've changed our minds on something. They were removed because the community told us they did not like them, and it was very, very strong, that feedback. So we're we're listening to our community. We're adjusting our Move, Connect, Live strategy to reflect a lot of the feedback we've been receiving from people who are impacted by these bike lanes in their immediate area.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Are you speaking to it? No. Would somebody else like to speak to it? Councillor Nagri?
I walked out of the meeting last year, and it's been debated out in the community as to why. And I'm going to do the same again tonight. And I'm not doing it, and I want to make that very, very clear to the community. I'm not doing it because I think that the protected bike lanes are the most important political issue that I've ever come across in my life, and I must die on a hill. I'm doing it because the way our council is going about this particular issue, I think, is duplicitous. It's gaslighting, and it's lying. 18A have been opposed by our community.
Point of order.
Yes, point of order.
53 Part E, an error of fact, and also quite disrespectful to be accusing us of lying.
Yes. All right. I'm going to rule on if you could all please stop speaking. Thank you. I will ask you to withdraw the remark. I do not find the gaslighting and lying appropriate to be seen. But you can go and leave the room if you'd like, but I'm making a ruling that you need to withdraw the remark.
I'll leave it up to the community then, but at every time that our council has
You need to withdraw the remark,
with,
please.
Sorry?
You need to withdraw the remark, please.
I said yes. I withdraw.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Mayor. At every time that we've interacted with any kind of intervention that looks like 18A, our council has voted to and asked the state government to remove such infrastructure. Similarly, in this council term, when a proposal was put forward to put bike corridors on a state arterial road, our council opposed it, which is 18B. So I'm not quite sure why we are amending our policy to include these 2 points if our council actually does not support it in practice. That is why I'm upset. But ultimately, that's up for the community. They can assess that. That's all I have to say on the matter. Thank you, Mayor.
Would anyone like to speak to it? Councillor Martin?
Can I move an amendment at this stage, please, Mayor?
Yes, you may.
So it's to 18A, to where it says to action 18A, can we add the words after the word abilities and a comma, and continue to explore opportunities for the provision of protected bike lanes within the city of Port Phillip?
Can be a provision. Can you look at the screen when it's done to make sure that's what it says for you?
Yes. That's it.
All right, I'll second that. Would you like to speak to it?
With pleasure. We heard a number of people earlier tonight speak about protected. They seem to be talking more about protected bike lanes than the general transport policy, and there were very strong views about whether we should have protected bike lanes or not. And I think there may well have been an assumption by some of the people who were speaking in favour of the motion as it stood, that they were believing that by passing the motion that's currently, as it's currently written, it would prevent council from exploring the opportunity to at least consider the installation of protected bike lanes in the city of Port Phillip. Now, it's been pointed out earlier that that's not the intent of this motion. Mr T was explaining that the motion as it does stand doesn't preclude that, but I want to make it very, very clear that I certainly believe that, yes, council should consider a whole range of different opportunities to make sure that cyclists are safe, but the provision of protected bike lanes is one of the many that we should explore, and where appropriate we should implement them, whether it's cost effective or appropriate with the infrastructure. There may be situations when it's fine to do, there may be situations when it's inappropriate. We need to be very, very clear, I believe, as a council, that we're not saying that we won't do it, we'll say we'll do it if and when it's appropriate, and that's the intent of this amendment. Just really, really clarifying what Mr T was saying earlier, so that there's no one who's been in the gallery tonight can leave, if this amendment is passed, being any illusion that we've actually closed the door on protected bike lanes.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. As I sang it in, I echo your thoughts on that, and I think it clarifies it for the community. Anybody else want to speak to just the amendment? Then we'll vote on the amendment. Councillor Sirikoff speaking to the amendment.
Yes. I think it's important to put this clarifying bit into the amendment, because I actually thought that it did exclude protected bike corridors, and so that's why I asked it, because when I first read the motion, I thought, oh wow, yeah, this is really going, just really addressing what a lot of the residents across the city of Port Phillip have been having real concerns about dedicated bike lanes turning up where they didn't want them. And so when I read it, I just thought at first that it was also going to mean we're no longer thinking about pop-up bike lanes. And one thing I didn't want the residents to kind of be led along the path that this is not the case. So I think it's good to clarify it, even though I think that what the decisions council has made over the past 18 months in not putting in pop-up bike lanes, because that's what the residents wanted, I think it's still really good to spell it out clearly what the motion is delivering. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to the amendment? All right, we're going to take the amendment only to the vote, whether this will become part of the substantive. All right, all those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. All right, so the substantive, we're going back. I've had Bond, Clark, and Yagri speak to it already. So everybody else who hasn't, you can speak it now. Baxter?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the amendment to try and walk back what this really is here, this report, which is to walk away from providing safe separated bike lanes in our community. I do want to take issue with the councillors who have said that there's been overwhelming or unanimous opposition to separated bike lanes in our community. It's simply not true. We certainly have seen, in some cases, well-organised opposition, usually born of various amounts of misinformation, but sometimes with legitimate concerns, against certain projects. But we're talking about 40 people getting in touch with us, or maybe 100 people getting in touch with us. These are in communities and neighbourhoods of 10,000, 15,000 people. Now, I understand that when you hear from a lot of people very forcefully about an issue, it can certainly give you an impression that the community is united in feeling that way. But we have to acknowledge that literally thousands of people we don't hear from, presumably those people who, either don't know much about what council is up to, or just sort of go, yeah, council they're doing some bike lane stuff and I'm kind of fine with it. And we don't hear from them because they're not particularly upset about it. Either that or they actually support what we're doing. Now, in 2018, we did consultation on the Move, Connect, Live integrated transport strategy, and that was the widest amount of consultation and engagement that we have ever done on transport from then until now, right? And what we got was broad support for it, right? So what we've heard since then are small groups of people who have been upset about very particular projects, but nowhere near the kind of numbers and broad feedback that we got during 2018. And also in 2018, the overwhelming weight of Australian and global evidence supported safe separated bike lanes as the best way to improve cyclist safety, improve cyclist health, and encourage a big uplift in ridership. And since then, actually, the evidence has grown stronger. It hasn't been disproven. It's actually grown stronger since then. We've only got more evidence since then to show that it is good for businesses. It is good for riders. It is good for drivers. It reduces congestion, all of these things. So this council report, it represents a big step backwards to pander to a very small but well-organised anti-bike lobby. It is a reflection that this council is the most anti-bike council in the history of Port Phillip, despite several councillors running for election on a platform of supporting safe cycling. yes, we may have had some well-organised opposition to certain proposed bike projects in the city of Port Phillip, but I don't think based on that we should be amending the policy to just drop the entire concept of a safe, separated bike lane network and instead just go, well, maybe we'll look at some kind of treatments here and maybe some other kind of treatments here. Will depend on who yells at us the loudest. That I don't think is a policy for how we can actively make the kind of changes we want to make in our integrated transport strategy, which include mode shift and health and all of the other benefits that come with cycling. So I will not be supporting this motion.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak to the substantive? I'll go real quick. Yes, I know that there are different views, and I think we need to take each one as it comes, whether the bike lane, protected bike lane is appropriate there or not. So a broad support. Some people think maybe they should be everywhere or a network, and that probably striving to that. But we already have a lot of spaces that already have gaps in the network, and I think it's really important to focus on fixing a few of those gaps where the lighting might not be consistent, all the little things that we can do that with what we have now, as well as looking at some of the larger projects. I still think there's options on Kerford Road. I know people are going to put red flags there, but maybe not as proposed to date. So I support that this is a little bit more realistic about where we're at now, and the last one was very ambitious, so this is a bit more honest to our community about what we're working on. Anybody else want to speak to it? Okay. Would you, Councillor Bond, do you want to close?
Yeah, just deciding whether or not I put most anti-bike council in Port Phillip history on my re-election flyer, alongside my 0 out of 4 Port Phillip bug rating, which I hope to maintain and take through to the next election. It is, the reason we didn't go ahead with those bike lanes that Councillor Nwage talked about is because the community told us they didn't want them. It's not that there was overwhelming support from them and we ignored the community. They told us they didn't want them. They told us they didn't want them to go ahead. They told us they wanted them removed when the pop-up bike lanes went in. And that's the reality here. I know, yes, you can consult on something and you get a response, but it's not until people say, well, how does this impact me, that they get upset and oppose. And we saw that in the instances of the pop-up bike lanes where people opposed from one end of our city to the other, and one side of our city to the other. And Kerford Road, we got the feedback from our residents that they didn't want this. So it's not being anti-bike, it's listening to our community and delivering to them what they want in their streets, out the front of their houses. That's what we're doing when we make those decisions. They're very specific decisions on those particular bike lanes. So I won't talk too much more about it, but I think this is a good change to our policy. It doesn't exclude separated bike lanes in the right locations, and hopefully we can find them. But we will always listen to our community before we make these decisions. And let's hope that never changes.
Microphone. Oh, we're going to take that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? All right. That passes. Carried. That's probably a better word than passes. Carried. All right. Anybody need a comfort break? We've been going an hour and a half. Okay, we're going to move on to 10.2. This is the Pickles Street Safety Improvement Evaluation. Yeah. We'll note that Councillor Nagri returned at 9:30. Any questions of the officers in relation to the report? I have a question. Who am I asking? The question is, I see the recommendation. What would need to be changed at this intersection to allow a right-hand turn, and I think it's called south direction, into Bridge Street?
Through you, ma'am. anticipating that Tom Mason might be answering that question.
Tom, are you online?
Yep, I can hear you fine
excellent.
through you, Mayor.
We can hear you.
So options to make this movement safe with confidence may include the removal of a traffic lane on Pickles Street or reduction on speed on Pickles Street. However, as Pickles Street serves a key part of the over-dimensional road network, that is probably unfeasible at this time. The only other alternative to make this movement safe would be to control it through traffic signals, and this would cost in the realms of $1.5 million, as detailed in the report.
Thank you. Further questions? Not looking for someone to read the officer's rec. Councillor Pearl's moving it. Councillor Martin to second it. Councillor Pearl, would you like to speak to it?
I'll reserve, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Martin to speak to it.
Thank you to the officers for the report. The officers' report recommends that the temporary treatment stay in place. I've also noticed, I've noted a number of the comments by people who both like the current treatment and those who would prefer to revert either to what was there previously or come up with a second treatment. I regularly use that area myself, and I have to say, I certainly feel much, having watched what I've seen at the intersection, having seen the statistics, I know that it's much safer for users at the moment. It is a pain in a part of the anatomy when you drive along and forget that the intersection's blocked and you have to do a U-turn. And yes, occasionally I may have snuck down Esplanade East because I couldn't turn right further down the street. And yes, I'm aware that there are some traffic impacts on those. But given that the overall result is an improvement, I believe, from my own observations and from the officers' recs, from the officers' report, that there's been an increase in safety. I think, weighing up all the pros and cons, I think it's a better outcome to leave the treatment in place. If we're going to keep people out of hospital, that's probably worth the minor inconvenience that some people have to put up with when people are looking to do U-turns and occasionally go up a side street.
Anybody else speaking to it? I'll go real quick. I don't like this media enclosure, and not many people in Port Melbourne do, but I do respect that some people find it to be the safer option, and that from a traffic point of view, that is the officer's recommendation. I appreciate the U-turn having been added into Bridge Street. That makes it much more feasible for people who may not realise the media enclosure is there, or are on that immediate block of houses, and they would have a very hard time getting to there. This is a really complicated section, and it's only one section of Port Melbourne that makes it complicated. There's not many ways to get, I guess, it'd be east-west across Port Melbourne because there's a block at Graham Street on one, and it's very complicated. The reason this was deferred is I had an idea about what if we restricted some of the movements across it. Would that then mitigate enough of the issue here that that turn could be reintroduced, the right-hand turn into Bridge Street? And it was deemed that those weren't, the moves that I was restricting weren't the main issue. The main issue was the right-hand turn into Bridge Street, which was the most significant of the statistics, crash statistics. So I can respect that I'm not the expert. That was just an idea. So I won't be supporting it because I don't think it is overly necessary, but I'm not the expert. So I understand that others, and I respect that they may be supporting it tonight. But I feel for the people of Port Melbourne, the people trying to get through Port Melbourne, this is just one more barrier. Thank you. Councillor Clark?
Yes, I won't be supporting this motion either. I use that street from time to time, and I don't believe this is required, and it does create a whole lot of other problems I think are potentially equal to the problem it's trying to solve. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford?
Yeah, I understand the safety issues. I think the challenge that this particular street, unlike most of the other ones that I have supported, is we have over-engineered the area about a block back, and I'm not quite clear of the reasons back that it was done. And in doing that, we've made this almost an unusable area. I do think, obviously, this is probably one of the areas, and it's a long-term goal that needs a set of lights. But, of course, there's funding and
permission and all of those things. But I do think that in whatever they were trying to capture with Crookshank Street doing the 2 one-ways and that whole area, we're engineering something that just is not particularly feasible. So I actually, very unlike me, won't be supporting this tonight.
Anybody else speaking to the item? Councillor Bond?
I will be supporting this. We've heard from one of the residents who is most impacted by this that the trial has worked. There were accidents here previously and they have been minimised, and I think it was almost eliminated, and he was very supportive. We've done this in other locations where unfortunately it means a number of people, or probably a large number of people, have to go a little bit further in order to prevent accidents happening at intersections like this. So, this is not unusual, but if it solves the problem, and the information we have before us is that it has solved the problem, well, it's a small price to pay to ensure our roads are a bit more safer at intersections like this.
Anybody else speaking to it? Otherwise, Councillor Pearl, would you like to close?
Thanks very much, Madam Mayor. This was very an item of great conjecture when we considered this last time, and councillors put a huge amount of effort into hearing a number of sides of the story. We did on-street meetings. I did 1 group one and 2 individual ones, and we considered this very, very deeply before we put the trial in place. And the trial has been overwhelmingly successful, and I think we've prevented collisions at this very unsafe intersection. And the evidence also indicates that the fears around the surrounding streets being flooded by rat-running traffic hasn't eventuated. We had a feeling that would happen at the time, and I think that's pretty much evidenced by the empty gallery here this evening in terms of and the lack of phone calls and emails compared to, I think there was 80-odd people that signed the petition, and I got numerous phone calls from people that had that concern. That concern hasn't eventuated. The neighbourhood integrity has remained intact. The road is now substantially safer. Traffic conditions for cyclists, for pedestrians and for car users has improved. There aren't too many situations that we can say we've done that across the city. It has disadvantaged a small number of people that have to do a go-around, and we have to freely admit that is the case. We have made some improvements to the street to mitigate some of those impacts, but some of them still remain. But overwhelmingly, the evidence indicates that this has been a significant road safety improvement, and the amenity of that area has substantially improved also. So I would encourage you, councillors, to go with the recommendation that is in front of us here this evening.
Thank you. All right, let's go to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? And abstaining? All right, so that's 4-4. And abstaining counts for against, so it's defeated. Can I just ask a governance rule question? Is there anything that we need? Yeah, hold on. Can I clarify a question? If this is to fail, is there anything that needs to be considered? Probably should ask this earlier, but anything that needs to be considered? Is it just it gets removed, or what is actually to be expected here?
Division.
Okay, maybe division. Huh? All right, it sounds like I can skip the question, but I think the community wants to know. So if it fails, does it just get removed?
Aren't we in the middle of voting?
We're in the middle of voting.
I'm asking a clarifying question because it's understanding what's happening here. What? Is that, if everyone could just stop, I'll ask governance if I need to do anything different.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll just go to the vote. Fine. Would you?
Someone's through you, Mayor. Rule 41 of the governance rules. A councillor may, when no other councillor is speaking, ask any question concerning arising out of the motion or amendment before the chair.
Doesn't say I can't. Clarifying question. If this fails, is it getting removed? Or is it coming back to councillors?
Mayor, I think we'd need to consider what actions we would need to take to restore it to its previous condition. and potentially come back to council.
Okay, well, there's been a call for division, so we'll see what it is. All those in favour? Okay, all those against? And anyone abstaining? It's the same. Oh, I didn't do division. Sorry, we did the whole thing without it. Sorry, guys. Okay. All those for Bond, Pearl, yes, for Baxter and Martin. All those against? Clark, Crawford, Consolo, and Sirikov, and abstaining Niagri. No, but it was division. I didn't call it out, so that's my fault. So it fails again. All right. Thank you, everybody.
It fails.
It fails. Just for the community, if you're listening, it sounds like we will be discussing this again. What's going to happen? All right. Now, does anybody need a comfort break, or are we going to keep going? All right, we're keeping going. On to 11.1, Stormwater Harvesting Program. All right. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers in relation to this report? No. We have an officer's recommendation. Councillor Clark would like to move this. Who would like to second the officer's recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Councillor Clark, would you like to speak to it?
Yes, I think this is a great program. I think this is a great change, and I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
So concise. Councillor Baxter? No? Anybody else speaking to the item tonight? Councillor Niagri?
I'll be voting against this tonight. I'm very happy that we are doing something, but I'm disappointed that we're not proceeding with both projects. I think we're again and again being put into a situation where we have to make choices around what we want to prioritise in this council. I think this is a program that is important and we should prioritise. I'm disappointed that it's been on hold and delayed for so long. I'd like us to consider what other projects might need to be delayed in order for us to achieve these kind of stormwater harvesting outcomes, which I think are really important for our community in the long run. We've come through a number of droughts in recent years. They're going to continue, and I'm very keen for us to deliver this kind of infrastructure. It's only going to keep getting more expensive.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to the item? Councillor Crawford.
Very quickly, I will be supporting this. Like Councillor Niagri, I obviously would like to do everything at once. However, I do think there is a few opportunities lining up with this particular one for the Elwood Park expansion, and obviously would be a great opportunity to look for where there are synchronicities with preventing pollutants going to the bay as part of that stormwater harvesting program. So I think there's just a few things lining up right now that makes sense to be the one that we are focusing on, and it'd be great to take some big step forwards and get this happening.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to it? Otherwise, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. All right, moving on quickly. 13.1, proposed lease of the Port Phillip EcoCentre in the St Kilda Botanical Gardens. Any questions of the officers in relation to the report? All right, who would like to move this or something else? Councillor Martin to move. Councillor Crawford to second. She had her hand up. Okay, Councillor Martin, would you like to speak to it?
I'd like to thank Jan Cossar from the EcoCentre who came and spoke to us earlier in public question time when she said that the EcoCentre would accept the 15-year lease if this motion's carried tonight. I also know that it's not the EcoCentre's perhaps first preference and that they would have preferred the maximum lease that's possible under the state government, which I think is 21 years. But given that they've agreed that they'll accept the 15-year lease, given the outstanding work that the EcoCentre has done and will continue to do, given the fact that they're on land which the council and the state government have made major contributions to, and they're about to open a fantastic facility, I think it's going to mean that for at least the next 15 years we can lock in a continuation of the outstanding programs that our wonderful EcoCentre delivers.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford?
I think this is, obviously not exactly where we want to get to, but an excellent start. We know what great work the EcoCentre does. I look forward to the negotiation of the funding deed and can't wait, obviously, slight delay, but can't wait for the EcoCentre to come online and get this lease started.
Excellent. Anybody else speaking to it? Councillor Baxter?
Thank you, Mayor. Yep, definitely echo. Can't wait to get the building there. I think that it's impossible really to think of any other organisation but the EcoCentre inhabiting not just that location but that amazing new building that's going to come in. So me personally, 100-year lease would have been fine by me, but 15 years I think is good. I'm glad we managed to increase that to go out to the community to do that statutory process. But here we are. Here's to at least 15 more years of the EcoCentre doing the amazing work that they do.
Thank you. Any last speakers? Councillor Niagri?
I'm a bit of a malcontent tonight. I'm going to vote against this as well. I'm disappointed that we've got to this stage as well. I think the survey results were pretty overwhelmingly not wanting this, and I will foreshadow that if this fails, which I suspect it won't, but if it were to fail, I would put forward a motion for us to go and start the necessary process to do 21 years. The community have been pretty clear. This is a purpose-built building. I can't quite understand how we ended up here, other than the personal views of councillors, which they're obviously entitled to. But so as a result, I'll be not supporting this.
Anybody else like to speak to this? Councillor Pearl.
Yeah, I'll also vote against it. I've thought a 10-year period is the appropriate level, and I foreshadow, should this motion fail, that I'll move it again with 10 years.
All right, anybody else speaking to the item? We'll go to the vote. Actually, did you want to close Councillor Merton? No, okay. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? All right. And who's abstaining?
Can I request a division, just so that any councillors who might want to change their vote have the opportunity to, please, Mayor?
Yeah, I think that we'll do that again. All those in favour? Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. So that would have been failed. Okay, thank you. Thank you for my helpers here. All right, we're going to do it under division. All those in favour, 15-year lease. That's Crawford.
Can I ask for a 2-minute recess, Mayor, before we vote?
I don't think so.
We're voting.
I'm sorry, we're not able to do that. Councillor Crawford, Councillor Baxter, Councillor Martin, Councillor Consolo, and Councillor Niagri. Those against, Councillor Clark, Councillor Bond, Councillor Sirikoff, and Councillor Pearl. That is carried. These things happen. Let's keep moving. We're now going to just get to the end of this meeting, right? No one else needs to come for a break. We're going. 13.2, this is a financial update, 2023-24, mid-year review. Thank you, everybody. Good night. Or no, not everybody else, just you. Okay. Any questions of the officers in review and in relation to this report? No. No questions? Okay, we have the officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something else? Councillor Martin, thank you for being quick with the hands. And Councillor Niagri, thank you for seconding. Councillor Martin, are you speaking to this?
Thank you to Peter Liu and his team who've prepared this document and prepared the financial statements. They're quite concerning in terms of our current financial position. And I note that we've got some major decisions to do when we come to the budget process as to whether we either reduce our expenditure or increase our revenue, because we need to do one or the other, or we may find ourselves facing a deficit situation. We have a number of items here that we've been asked to support and to fund. The good news is that they only add $70,000 to this year's expenditure, but if you read carefully you'll see that there's major transfers of funding between different council pools, and there's also a commitment to some expenditure in further years. And again, that's going to carry forward into the budget process and implications on the budget process. Of the items that are mentioned there, the Elwood change rooms are desperately needed so that we can give our girls in particular the chance to get changed in a safe and appropriate environment. So the sooner we can get this project up and running, the better. The baseball pitch, and enormous work has been done there, and unfortunately because of costs going up we need to spend a little bit more, but given that we've done so much, this will be the final stage in finishing our baseball, and now they can play their baseball under lights on their perfect diamond. Thank you to the Albert Park Bowls Pavilion, to the Albert Park Bowling Club, not to the pavilion itself, but to the bowling club, who've agreed to put a substantial amount of money forward into their upgrade, and we're providing a little bit of extra funds to make sure they can complete this development. And then last but not least, through major issues, we cannot fund the completion of the Pitch 2 reconstruction unless we provide some more money. This is an essential thing to keep Murphy Reserve up to standard. So I commend the report to you and the recommendations included in the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Nagby? No? All right. Anybody else speaking to this? All right. Let's go to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you. All right. 13.3, Councillor Expenses Monthly Reporting, November and December 2023 and January 2024. Any questions of the officers in relation to the report? We have an officer's recommendation. Councillor Pearl to move. Who would like to second it? Councillor Sirikoff, thank you. Councillor Pearl, you speaking to it? Councillor Sirikoff, anybody else? Now we're moving quickly. All right, to the vote. All those in favour? Hands up. Thank you. That's carried unanimous. All right, final report is, pardon? No. 13.4, records of informal meetings of council. All right, any questions of officers in relation to this report? I'm looking for someone to move it. Thank you, Councillor Pearl and Councillor Sirikoff. Councillor Pearl to speak to it. Councillor Sirikoff. Anybody else? All right, let's take that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you. So that's the end of the presentation reports, but we have a notice of motion tonight that we're considering. There's one notice of motion. This is item 14.1, raised by Councillor Martin in relation to Heritage Verandah upgrade project. Under Section 42 of Council's governance rules, this motion was deferred at the 7th of February Council meeting. So, Councillor Martin, would you like to move this notice of motion again? Are there any questions? Any questions at this point? Is that moving or seconding, Pond, or a question? We'll pause for questions. I think that's a better order. Okay. Questions? Go ahead, Councillor Bond.
Have we resolved the ownership of these verandas as yet?
Through you, Mayor, Council's planning officers believe that the ownership does reside with the landlords. However, the landlords continue to feel that as those verandas are not on their titles, that they do not accept this. There is a precedent where one such case has been taken to VCAT and the responsibility was found to be the landlords. So we have one precedent to go from. It would have to be resolved in a legal situation to have a definitive answer.
Yes, Councillor Bond?
As of last Wednesday, I was informed that the landlords in this situation hadn't actually been asked to make a contribution towards these verandas. Has that situation changed? Have they been asked to make a contribution towards this, the property owners? And if so, what was the response that has been received?
Through you, Mayor, the Clarendon and Coventry Street Business Association confirmed that yes, they did reach out to all landlords over the past 2 weeks after the last council meeting, and no landlords were forthcoming in offering to support the funding.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right, Councillor Martin, would you like to move this again? I will second it. Would you like to speak to it?
First, I'd like to acknowledge Lauren's work in delving in the last 2 weeks into answering a number of the queries that our councillors have raised, and I think most councillors now have a much clearer idea of the financial background and the legal background of the situation that we're in. We've been doing all sorts of things to improve many of our local streets. Our Bay Street traders have been working very hard in Bay Street. Council's been putting an enormous amount of time and effort into Ackland Street, into Fitzroy Street. We've recently moved on and we're looking after the Carlisle Street traders. Clarendon Street has been the poor relation of our major high streets, and with shopfront closures, apparent loss of amenity due to some of the verandas in particular looking somewhat tatty. The traders have gone to a lot of work to seek a variety of sources of funding, including the state government, to ensure that they can bring these verandas back to their original pristine state. The state government funded verandas, not verandas that were funded by the local traders or by the landlords, but by the state government, hence some of the confusion over who's responsible to them. I'm confident that if this motion is passed, which is simply committing council to waiving a small amount of fees, and we've had a breakdown of what all those fees represent, and all councillors have had that information, then there will be a significant improvement in foot traffic over the next few months in Clarendon Street, that it'll go towards further moving on the revival of Clarendon Street, and we all hope to see Clarendon Street back to its glory days. Those of you with long memories remember when you couldn't get past the old paper shop deli at morning tea time because the footpath was packed. We'd love to see all that again. So I urge you to please support this now that you've all seen the background, the property ownership background, the legal background, the fund sourcing background, so that this project has to be completed by June or the state government funding lapses and we lose the opportunity to do a major revitalisation of one of our major high streets.
Thank you. I'll also be supporting this, and I really urge my fellow councillors to. I'm happy if this becomes a precedent. If a group of traders come to us saying they've acquired funding from the state government, I'm sure there was some conditions there that the state government thought this is a valid project because of the situation that it's not on titles, and they put it in 40-something years ago. And that they're not actually asking for cash, they're asking for us to waive some fees already, and it's an internal transfer. I welcome that because it's beautification of our high streets, and I think it's going to have a nice impact. I'd be very grateful for this to happen, so I will be supporting it. Anybody else want to speak to it? Sorry, Councillor Sirikoff first, and then Councillor. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just think that the Trade Association has put in a lot of effort to try to beautify Clarendon Street. Council has been going through all the high streets across the city of Port Phillip, and we will be investing a lot of time and money to uplift these streets. And what we have here is a trade association. They're doing it themselves, and not necessarily for their own property fronts, but these are the property fronts that are significantly heritage buildings, even though the verandas themselves were built or replaced in 1983, I think it was. So they're up for replacement. They'll 25-year guarantee on the works done. It's going to give us something like 25 to 40 years of beautifying the street to create a beautiful kind of along the lines of boulevard type thing of a heritage type street, which everybody loves to look at old photos going back in way gone years. And but this is going to create a bit of a revitalisation as we do other things to improve and uplift Clarendon Street, which does need some love and care. And I think that Trade Association doing this, they found 90% of the money from the Vic government, which is really great work. They've gone and done this to try to fix up their area, and council is basically left with another 10% of just waiving fees. And I think this is going to be a benefit to the whole of the community. Thank you.
Councillor Baxter, speak to
I'll make mine very quick. I said last meeting that I didn't have enough information to make the decision. I now have that information. I'm happy to support it now.
Excellent. Councillor Clark?
A lot of this goes against everything I stand for. I don't support us investing in private property. The fact that the traders haven't been prepared to invest in themselves tells you that perhaps they don't value it. I don't believe in the state paying for upgrades to private property, and as yet I'm yet to hear from council as to who actually is going to own these verandas and what the maintenance involves. That said, I recognise the work that's been done by the Traders Association. It is a small amount of money and it's a waiving. If it was us actually giving money, I would not support it. So I will support it, but I think it crosses into dangerous precedents that we are investing in private property, and I think it's a slippery slope. So need to be sort of reluctantly supporting this. I don't think I'd be supporting too much more if these type of proposals are going to come again. Thanks.
Councillor Bond?
I won't be supporting this for a lot of the reasons I outlined at the last meeting. The landlords, who are the main beneficiary here, who are having work done on their property by thanks to a state government grant and a waiving of fees by the City of Port Phillip, are the main beneficiary here, and they're not contributing a single cent. In every other street in this city where we've done a program, we've asked the landlords to contribute, we've asked them to come to the party where we've done something that directly benefits them, and mostly they have. So therefore I just cannot bring myself to support it, especially on a night like this where we've decided to exit home care for our elderly because we can't afford it. I'm pleased that earlier today we found out that the young lady that was running her yoga classes down at St Kilda Beach, who we requested get a $10,000 or up to $10,000 permit so she could continue to do that.
Can you please speak
because
to
we
the
wasn't
item?
able-
Can
I'm
you please,
talking to it.
Councillor Bond, can you please stop and please err of fact, but can you please just speak to the item? And it's a long night. If you
I
could
believe
get
I
to...
am speaking to the principal behind this item.
Through you, Mayor, I just want to clarify, I don't believe council officers, there's been requests for a $10,000 permit fee for Feel Good.
Yeah, that's actually not accurate.
Well, it is accurate because she estimated that she had to get an event permit for 100 people every week.
Councillor Bond, I have ruled that you need to speak to the item. It is actually factually incorrect, and I'm not upset. It's just that you're actually taking the story wrong. You're wrong. So if you'd like to stick to the item, you can keep speaking. Otherwise, we have to keep going.
I don't believe I am wrong. Cause
If you want to listen to my ruling, you can keep speaking. Otherwise, you're going to have to stop.
Then I'll finish by, I think as a council we've all managed to redeem ourselves by giving a much-needed break to that that disadvantaged group called multi-millionaire property owners in South Melbourne. A great way to finish the night.
Councillor Nagri, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I really appreciate the traders' work on this one. I appreciate having the extra 2 weeks to consider this one further. I'm also kind of reluctantly supporting it tonight. I think on balance, we've gone a long way into this process. We would do reputational damage to council and to the traders group, I think, if we were to pull out now. And I think on balance, this is going to provide a really significant public realm benefit. I think there are definitely questions around the ownership of the verandas which needs to be resolved going forward. And look, this isn't just a question of this particular property. We have a lot of private property that kind of is in the public realm as well that has impacts on our amenity. We also have a lot of heritage buildings that have challenges around upkeep. These are bigger questions that we can't really answer tonight, but with this $35,000 fee waiving, I think we can ultimately make Clarendon Street a better place to shop and hopefully contribute to its uplift.
Thank you. Any final parties speaking? No. Councillor Martin, to close.
Very briefly, particularly in response to Councillor Bond's comments, there are some very small traders doing it very, very tough in Clarendon Street, and this very small waiving of council fees will make an enormous difference to those traders who are really, really struggling, may keep a few shop fronts open to save them becoming derelict, and increase the amenity of the street, which in turn will benefit our council long term.
Thank you. Let's take that to the vote. All those in favour? That's all those against? All right.
Division required.
Yep. All right. All those in favour? Clark, Crawford, Baxter, Martin, Consolo, Pearl, Niagri, Sirikoff. All those against? Councillor Bond. That's carried. Thank you. All right. Sorry, Teresa. I don't think you realise that we have one more thing. Or two more things, and hopefully nothing on this one. Reports by councillors' delegates. Is there any councillor delegation reports tonight? Okay, we're going to move to the last thing, which is urgent business. Councillors, in accordance with Section 20 of the governance rules, we have one item of urgent business on tonight's agenda, being 16.1, local government legislative reform submission. This item has been added as urgent business due to the short timeline for submission provided by the local government Victoria. Councillors, I now. We have to vote on it being accepted. So I now seek a mover to accept it as urgent item of business. Thank you, Councillor Pearl and Councillor Nyagi to second. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, urgent item business, voting, hands up. That's carried. All right. Urgent item business. So 16.1, local government legislative reforms submission. Do you have any questions of the officers in relation to the report? All right. right. If not, we have an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something else? Councillor Pearl to move. Councillor Baxter to second. Councillor Pearl, are you speaking to it? Councillor Baxter, are you speaking to it? All right. Councillor Crawford?
It's good that we're moving this because there is the VLGA one on mayors and councillors on Friday, so this will be a formal position that we can take, which is good.
Excellent. Good point. All right. Thank you. Then let's take the... Oh, Councillor Pearl to speak.
Thanks to the officers, Xavier. Thank you for putting this together. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Let's take that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. All right. We have don't have the confidential items, so there being no further business, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you, Teresa.